Chapter 1203. Meg felt much more relaxed after the first delivery order was confirmed. Moreover, compared to those complicated alleys and various houses, it would be easier for Connie to get lost in the Bawtai prison if she were to deliver the food. It was such a big prison, and there was only one door. She should be able to get there, right? Please come again. Yabamiya sent off the last customer, and flipped the wooden sign on the door to announce the end of business for the morning. Then, what should I do? Connie walked down the stairs with her helmet. She didn't have to do anything when everyone was busy in the morning. Although it was easy, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. If you're really bored, you can ride the bicycle around the streets to familiarize yourself with the streets. Meg looked around, and his gaze settled on Anna. He smiled and said, "Anna, do you want to go out with Connie for a walk?" "Sure." Anna nodded her little head. "If she gets lost, remember to bring her back," Meg said softly as he put a little white rabbit ear muff on Anna's head. Anna answered obediently. She followed Connie, who put on the helmet and walked out of the door. "Be careful. Don't hurt Anna," Meg reminded Connie. "Don't worry. I'm super." Smack. Connie, who was pushing the bicycle, stepped on a piece of ice, and fell to the ground. She was crushed by the bicycle. "Big sister Connie, are you all right?" Anna asked anxiously. "I'm fine." Connie's weak voice came from the ground. "How dare you laugh at ugly duckling like that?" Meg pursed his lips. He moved the bicycle away from Connie, and then picked her up from the ground. Meow. Ugly duckling poked its head out of the door, and gave Connie a disdainful look. "It's not a big deal." Connie coughed dryly and got on the bicycle. Then, she patted the back seat of the bicycle and removed the insulated box. She said confidently, "Little Anna, get on. Big sister will take you for a ride. I think I should continue to practice cooking in the restaurant." Anna said worriedly. "Don't worry, there won't be a problem." Connie patted her chest and promised. Then, she turned to look at Ugly Duckling, who was standing at the door. Her eyes lit up, and she said, "Why don't we bring this stupid cat with us?" Meow. Ugly Duckling's fur stood on end, and it disappeared through the door. "Well, you don't trust me that much." Connie was a little disappointed. Unable to refuse Connie's invitation, Anna finally got on Connie's bike. "Mr. Mag, I'm here on the Lord's orders." Mag was just about to enter when a black shadow appeared next to him, and whispered to him. "Come in." Meg opened the door, and let the man in black enter the restaurant first. He followed him in. He had already noticed this black shadow, so he asked Anna to go out with Connie to play. "This is what the Lord asked me to pass to you." The man in black handed a black wooden box that was about 1/2 meter square to Meg. "Thank you." Meg took the box. It wasn't heavy, and it should be filled with information. However, it seemed like there was a lot of it. "Goodbye." The man in black didn't say anything else. A black mist rose, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Meg carried the box upstairs to the study. This should be the latest information on the various races that Michael and Roland promised to share with him yesterday. Meg already knew the history of the Norland continent and the history of the various races by heart after reading non-stop for the past few months. However, the core information that was close to the ruling class of the various races, as well as the current situation of the various races, wasn't something that could be obtained by the encyclopedia. This information was what Meg needed the most. It was also one of the bargaining chips that he valued the most in this deal. After going upstairs and closing the study door, Meg placed the box on the study table. A dark gray light flashed across the surface of the box as soon as his hand touched the lock. The faint golden light that enveloped the box dissipated, and the lock opened with a click. After opening the box, there were stacks of information neatly stacked inside. They were all tied up with hemp ropes according to the categories, including the Roth Empire, the Wind Forest, and Chaos City. There were a total of 9 sets of information, and not a single power was missing. I wonder what kind of sincerity the Lord and the City Lord will show, Meg murmured to himself as he picked up the information on the Wind Forest. He untied the hemp rope, and removed the top piece of paper. The first report with the word urgent written in red attracted Meg's attention immediately. The night elves obtained food through unknown channels, and used the food quality of the elven guards to destabilize the guards' morale. A patrol team of 30 people defected at the same time last night, and volunteered to join the night elves. Borg ordered to increase the intensity of the patrols, and began to gather the troops to prepare for the second encirclement against the night elves. As for the Wind Forest, the High Priestess Helena has already gathered 5,000 elves because the guards have been trapped for a long time without success. They will set off for the underground cavern border tomorrow to meet up with Borg and encircle the night elves together. Meg put down the urgent report in his hand with a grave expression. Sargeras had just returned to Chaos City yesterday, so this urgent report should have just arrived. Michael and Roland were indeed very sincere. The situation of the night elves was worse than Meg had expected. It seemed like Helena and Borg had reached a consensus that the unstable factor, the night elves, had to be completely eliminated before the peace talks between the various races. After putting the urgent report aside, Meg continued to read the information on the elves. Soon, he came to an introduction of the night elves and the Wind Forest strength. After a month of rapid expansion, the night elves still had less than 1,000 people. Furthermore, most of them were slave elves with low combat abilities. Most of the elves who were rushing to the underground cavern from all over the Norland continent were intercepted by the elves sent out by the Wind Forest. Those who could reach the underground cavern did not have the strength to break through the blockade and meet up with the night elves. On the other hand, the Wind Forest had already sent out 10,000 elite guards to surround the underground cavern. Although they did not have the terrain advantage, they were completely superior to the night elves in terms of high-end combat power and core strength. Once they were determined to attack the underground cavern regardless of the cost, the night elves would very likely be wiped out. Meg pondered for a while before continuing to read the information on the elves. This information was very detailed and timely. The most recent one had just been sent back the night before, and it clearly listed the current situation in the Wind Forest, as well as the grievances of all the important figures in the elven race. Helena, that damned old hag. She really deserves to die. Meg murmured to himself as he put down the last piece of paper. Chapter 1204. Meg had only finished reading all the information about the Wind Forest in the morning. There was a lot of knowledge. Luckily, he had a good memory, so he remembered everything. And some of the things that Alex's memory was missing were like scattered fragments that Meg found and filled in one by one, allowing him to understand many things that he didn't understand before. Back then, the Elven Queen had issued 13 Queen's orders consecutively. In the end, she made Irina return to the Wind Forest and put her under house arrest with the reason that her serious injuries had relapsed. Although the outside world didn't know that Irina was pregnant, it wasn't difficult for Meg to deduce that Irina was pregnant with Amy at this point in time. And a few months later, a huge battle suddenly broke out at the Tree of Life. However, no one responded to it. Not long after that, there was news that Irina had gone into seclusion, and there was no news from her ever since. She had been quiet for 3 years. According to the spies in Chaos City, someone had seen Helena appear at the Tree of Life that day. The two of them might have fought, and Helena went into seclusion for a few months after that. According to the time, that was when Irina gave birth to Amy. Helena, that bitch, must have taken advantage of Irina's weakness to snatch Amy away and severely injure Irina. After that, it was that rainy night that targeted Alex. The infant Amy became the weapon in the hands of those fellows. Helena was obviously the most hidden mastermind behind the scenes. Seems like I have to make a trip to the underground caverns personally. Meg muttered to himself. If Helena led the troops to the underground caverns, the night elves would definitely be defeated. He had to do something personally. After closing the wooden box and putting it in the secret compartment behind the desk, Meg calmed himself down and went downstairs to prepare for the lunch service. Camilla arrived not long after Meg went downstairs. Camilla looked around. After confirming that there were only Meg and Ugly Duckling in the dining room, she walked into the kitchen, looked at Meg, and said, "Say, how long do you want me to work for you here?" "The current plan is 1 year." Meg looked back at Camilla and said with a smile, "Of course, if you want, you can work for a few more years. I'm very satisfied with your ability. Do you know what might happen if you let Countess Bartoli work for you for a year?" Camilla's voice was cold, and the temperature in the kitchen seemed to have dropped. "I only know that if you don't work for a full year, around midnight, many men's entertainment will be watching the photo stone," Meg said with a smile. "You..." Camilla's face turned red. This fellow actually said such shameless words. Thinking of her shameful appearance being seen by other men, she would have no face to see anyone in the future. "I'm a good person." Meg smiled. Camilla was the one who knocked him out with the baton, prepared the whip and candles, and brought the photo stone with her. If it wasn't for Mag's proficient tying skills, the story of that day would have been completely different. Therefore, Meg didn't feel guilty at all. Looking at Camilla gnashing her teeth, he felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. "Okay, but you have to write me a guarantee. If you don't give me all the photo stones after a year, I will kill you at all costs." Camilla took out a piece of parchment and a red pen from her bosom and slapped them in front of Meg. Meg straightforwardly picked up the pen and wrote a guarantee on the parchment. After a year, he should at least be able to rise to the 9th rank, right? If they were of the same rank, Meg was confident that he could play Camilla in the palm of his hand. No matter how hard she tried, she wouldn't be able to cause any ripples. After signing his name, the parchment lit up with a red light and split into two, entering Meg and Camilla's bodies. "This is a magic contract. If you break the promise, you will be cursed for eternity." Camilla put away the parchment and smiled with a hint of satisfaction. This way, she at least had a minimum guarantee. "As long as you work hard, I will fulfill the promise." Meg nodded and didn't care about the contract. He continued, "Look at this soaked red pepper, it needs to be cut like this. I don't need you to tell me how to cut vegetables." Camilla waved her hand, and the basin full of red chow tian peppers flew into the air. 10 thin knives embedded in her fingers slashed across the air, and the red peppers that filled the air instantly turned into chopped peppers and fell back into the basin. "RBQ, RBQ." Meg silently put away the kitchen knife and began to prepare some food that needed to be prepared in advance. No matter how you looked at it, he didn't look like the one with cheats. These guys were simply too strong. Although cutting vegetables isn't tiring, it's too depressing to work under this guy every day. I have to think of a way to make him give me the photo stone. Camilla looked at Meg's back and pondered. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. Yes. If I have a copy of his photo stone, then I can make an equivalent exchange with him. I'll let you be proud. Tonight, I'll let you have a good taste of the whip and candle. This time, I won't let you have the chance to struggle. Camilla looked at Meg's back and sneered. It was as if she could already see him struggling pitifully under her. Just thinking about it made her feel very amused. "Madam Mafia, please take care. You're welcome to come again next time." Bonnie smiled as she sent a noblewoman onto a luxurious carriage and watched the carriage leave. Then, she heaved a long sigh of relief and revealed a bright smile on her face. It was a very successful reception. Madame Mafia, who was in a good mood, bought all the new jewelry for this month. She spent 15 million copper coins, which was basically equivalent to Shia Jewelry's monthly turnover. The congee with pork and century egg has really helped me a lot. Bonnie touched her throat gently. She hadn't touched that small bowl of congee with pork and century egg, but her throat still didn't feel dry and itchy after she introduced tens of new products to Madame Mafia. Obviously, it was the miraculous effect of the congee with pork and century egg in the morning. I really should thank Mr. Mac properly. Should I treat him to a meal? Bonnie thought for a while, and rejected that idea. There was no other restaurant in Chaos City that could make food as delicious as Mamie's. How could she not cough the entire morning? Callie looked at Bonnie, who was standing at the door, in disbelief. More importantly, Bonnie had signed a huge order worth 15 million copper coins, and proved her powerful ability. Just this order alone would give her a commission of over 1 million copper coins. Envy, jealousy, fear, resentment. All kinds of emotions surged into Callie's heart at the same time. She thought Bonnie's throat would make her lose her biggest customer, Madame Mafia, pathetically, and then get fired by the store manager and become an abandoned child in the jewelry industry. She didn't expect that she, who had been coughing for a month, could actually complete the reception for Madame Mafia this morning without coughing. Chapter 1205. In the royal palace of Rodu. A knight stood in front of the king with his head bowed, and respectfully said, "Your Majesty, that chef from Chaos City refused to come to Rodu, and my knight encountered the Lord of the Grey Temple, Roland, and was unable to bring him back. Please punish him, Your Majesty. He didn't want to come." A knowing smile appeared on the king's face as he waved his hand, and said, "It's not your fault. He dared to refuse my invitation in the palace, so it's no surprise that he would refuse your invitation as well. However, I didn't think that Roland would appear in person for a chef." "Do you need me to investigate this chef?" the knight asked. "No need for that. I have something more important for you to do." André shook his head, and said a few words to the knight in a hushed voice, after which the knight agreed to leave. "If he doesn't come, then I won't be able to explain myself to Vanessa." André heaved a forlorn sigh, and a hint of resignation appeared on his stern face. He paced back and forth in the palace before making his way out. Laura hurriedly ran into the room, and said to Princess Vanessa, who was reading a book on her bed, "Your Highness, His Majesty is here." "Really? Father, did you invite Chef Meg here?" Vanessa immediately got up from her bed, and allowed Laura to tidy up her clothes as she asked with an elated expression. Laura shook her head, and said with certainty, "His Majesty didn't tell me. However, with His Majesty's invitation, there's no way that Chef would dare to refuse." "That's true. Father, you're the best king in the world." A smile appeared on Vanessa's face, and she quickly strode out of the room after tidying her hair. "Father, is Chef Meg here?" Vanessa quickly made her way over to the king, who was standing at the window, with anticipation in her eyes. "You keep talking about Chef Meg and Chef Meg as soon as you open your mouth. Have you completely forgotten about your father? Is the king of the Roth Empire inferior to a chef in Chaos City?" André said with a stern expression, but there was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he looked at Vanessa. "Who said so? No one in this world can compare to father." Vanessa shook her head before asking with an expectant look in her eyes, "Has he arrived at Rodu? Or have they arrived at the Imperial Palace? Can we have the dinner he cooks tonight?" Laura stood outside the door and listened to the conversation between the king and Princess Vanessa with a smile on her face. The king doted on the princess the most. She had never seen the king get angry and listen to everything the princess wanted. "He refused my invitation." André shook his head. "He refused." Vanessa was stunned. She looked at Andre and said, "He's not willing to come and cook for us." He actually refused. Laura covered her mouth with shock in her eyes. There was actually someone in this world who dared to refuse the king's invitation, and he was only a chef. She had heard from the princess that he was a very good chef who could cook very delicious food. But no matter what, he was just a lowly chef. It was his honor to cook for the nobles. To be able to receive the king's invitation to cook for the king and her highness was such an honor. How could he refuse? Yes, he is an interesting chef. I invited him to stay in the royal kitchen during my banquet, but he also refused my invitation, saying that he wanted to go back and cook for his guests. Andre nodded. There were not many people who dared to refuse him, and Meg had refused him twice in a row. Even though he was only a lowly chef, he still remembered him. However, perhaps it was because the spicy grilled fish he made was too unforgettable, and he often thought about it when he was eating. He increasingly felt that the food in the royal kitchen recently tasted very ordinary. Is that so? He refused the king's invitation to cook for normal guests. He really is a very interesting chef. Vanessa was initially feeling a little dejected, but her eyes gradually lit up upon hearing that. A chef who dared to refuse the king's invitation must have extraordinary courage, and was willing to bring delicious food to more people instead of being restricted to the luxurious palace. This chef really was a great person. Don't be sad, Vanessa. Soon, no matter where he is on the continent, he'll have to come and cook for you as long as you ask, Andre consoled. Vanessa nodded. She turned to Andre, and asked, I heard Uncle Abraham is in Chaos City now, and he comes to Mamie's every day to eat. Is that true? He just loves to eat. He went to Chaos City with that chef Meg last time, and didn't come back for a few months. Looks like he's forgotten that he's the Duke of the Roth Empire, Andre said with a hint of resignation in his voice. Among all of his brothers, Abraham was the one he couldn't discipline the most. Back when they were fighting for the throne, Abraham was the most determined to stand by his side. He had even taken an arrow for him during the battle for the throne, and was severely wounded. After he ascended the throne, he had planned to entrust Abraham with important responsibilities, but after he recovered from his injuries, he resigned from all of his positions, and only kept his title. He didn't even want to be given any land, and did nothing but eat, drink, and play every day. It could be said that he was the most idle person in the Norland Empire. All right, then I'll wait for that day to come. I'll wait for Chef Meg to come to Rodu and cook delicious food for me, Vanessa said obediently. However, a sly look flashed across her eyes. A delicacy that could make Uncle Abel forget to go back had to be the best in the world. She had to try it herself. All right, I'll get the Imperial Kitchen to prepare your favorite snow pear porridge. Father, you're going to take care of some government affairs now, Andre said to Vanessa with a doting expression. Go ahead, father. Vanessa nodded, and walked Andre out of the door. After watching him disappear into the distance, she immediately waved at Laura. Princess. Laura made her way over. Laura, hurry up and pack your things. We're going to leave, Vanessa whispered. Are you going to the manor for a vacation again, princess? Laura was perplexed. They had only returned to the palace for a few days. Vanessa smiled slyly and said, That's what I told father and the others, but we're actually going to Chaos City. I'm going to find Uncle Abraham. Chaos City. Laura's voice immediately rose a few octaves. Shoo, someone will hear us. Vanessa covered Laura's mouth. But your highness, if the king and queen find out that you're missing, they'll be very worried, Laura whispered anxiously. Vanessa smiled and said, It's all right. When we reach Chaos City, I'll find Uncle Abraham and get him to write a letter to father. Chapter 1206. Achoo! Abraham, who was standing in the long line in front of Mamie restaurant, sneezed as he tightened his mink coat around himself. He couldn't help but murmur, "I'm wearing this to keep me warm. Could someone be missing me? Uncle, everyone is thinking about Mr. Mac's new dish. Why would they miss you?" Randy, who was standing next to him, looked at the notice board hanging on the door with a worried expression. "I say, Gourmet, have you handed in your manuscript for this month?" Abraham asked Randy with a smile as he turned sideways to look at him. The two of them had been sharing tables frequently during this period of time, so they had become familiar with each other. However, Abraham didn't reveal his identity as a duke, but he knew that Randy was a columnist for Carnivorous Doctrine, and that he had to submit a manuscript to the magazine every month. Most importantly, he had delayed his manuscript again. "Sigh, my life has been smooth sailing, and I became a columnist for Carnivorous Doctrine at a young age. I didn't expect to meet with a Waterloo at Mamie's. What a pity, what a pity." Randy sighed, and was at a loss for words. Abraham rolled his eyes, and said, "Look at you. Aren't you trying to push the blame to Mr. Mac? He has created so many delicacies, and any one of them is enough for you to write a good article. Where else can you find such a good place? Even if you turn the whole of Roto upside down, you won't be able to find another place like this, let alone Chaos City." Randy scowled, and said, "But that's where the problem lies. All the delicacies that Mr. Mac has launched are the best delicacies. Back then, when I published it on Carnivorous Doctrine, I made a huge promise that I would never write about it and share it with my readers unless I found the most delicious meat. Great, I've found the most delicious meat, but every one of them is so delicious, and they all have their own specialties. Isn't this killing me? I have difficulty choosing. So, young man, don't be too full of yourself." Abraham patted Randy's shoulder sympathetically. After thinking for a while, he said, "But why do you have to be so stubborn? Mr. Mac's meat dishes all have their own specialties. You can just write a dish every time, and it won't be the same. With the speed at which Mr. Mac releases new dishes, you just have to live nearby for the rest of your life. You won't have to worry about not having enough material." "Ha!" Randy's eyes lit up as if he had suddenly discovered something. Just as Abraham had said, with his speed of writing a food blog post every month, Mr. Mac was practically an inexhaustible treasure trove. Since that's the case, let's start with today's new dish, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. I think it's another one of Mr. Mac's bold creations. Randy's gaze became determined. He had already decided that he had to order a new dish and carefully taste the wonders of this dish. He had to write an article that would make people salivate. This was the pride of a food blogger. Ding! The bell rang, and Meg opened the door. He smiled and said, "Welcome, Amy's." The customers who had been waiting for a long time all smiled and greeted Meg before entering the restaurant. The first thing they did when they sat down was to flip open the menu on the table and search through the delicacy section. Then, they found the new dish hidden under the seafood section, steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, 1,000 copper coins per serving. Noodles can be added, 50 copper coins for one tail. Wow! There are so many red chilies. Just looking at it makes my throat feel like it's on fire. Could it be hotter than the insanely spicy grilled fish? Harrison looked at the plate of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers that was almost filled with red chilies and swallowed his saliva subconsciously. His urge to order a new dish was instantly extinguished. Many customers looked at the picture of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, and some hesitation appeared on their faces. Many people had tried the spicy grilled fish personally before. It was spicy and refreshing, and it was irresistible. However, if this steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers was even better, it was probably not something that ordinary people could accept. Randy and Abraham sat at the same table again. Once they sat down, Randy flipped open the menu on the table, and his gaze quickly landed on the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. His eyes lit up instantly, and he could not help but exclaim, "The bright red chilies form a sharp contrast with the white and tender fish meat. It brings a strong impact." In terms of color, Mr. Mac is still as sharp as a genius. I also admit that Mr. Mac is a genius. However, if it's too spicy, it's not very friendly to middle-aged people like us. Abraham looked at the picture of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and a conflicted expression appeared on his face. Of course, he wanted to try Mr. Mac's new dish. However, the spicy grilled fish was already too spicy for him. This steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers looked even hotter. It was a big problem whether to order it or not. "Uncle, then let us youngsters try it first," Randy said with a smile. Coincidentally, Yabamiya came to their table, so he said, "I want a steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. However, how do you add the noodles? Do you cook them directly in the fish head?" The surrounding customers were also listening attentively. The operation of adding noodles was indeed very curious. Moreover, 50 copper coins for 50 grams of noodles was not cheap. The noodles are served separately after the customers finish eating the fish head. The customers can pour the gravy of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers over the noodles before eating, Yabamiya answered with a smile. "Is this a new way of eating that Mr. Mac invented?" Randy raised his eyebrows. It sounded quite interesting. He smiled and nodded. "Then, I want to add another 200 grams of noodles." "All right, please wait a moment." Yabamiya nodded and left. This was the first customer to order the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. It was a good start. Dishes were brought out from the kitchen one by one, and then served in front of the customers one by one. When eating at Amy's, it was common to see the scene of plates floating in the air. There was no need to be too surprised. It was just Miss Barbara serving the dishes. The gravy in the plates did not ripple at all, let alone the terrible scene of the gravy splattering. Such a magical scene could not be seen in other restaurants. After all, not every restaurant could have a level 7 spatial magic caster serve the dishes. The laymen were just there to watch the show, and the professionals were naturally even more obedient. In this restaurant, just the waiters alone were not to be trifled with. "Your steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers." Not long after, a large tray floated out from the kitchen and landed gently in front of Randy. A crisp sound came from the kitchen, and then the cover on the tray was lifted instantly. The dense steam spread out with a slight sour and spicy aroma of the fish. The eyes of the people sitting at the same table lit up immediately. The surrounding customers, whose auras were isolated, could not help but look at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers on the table. The fiery red chopped peppers covered the entire fish head, and there was a bright oily glow. The bright color and rising steam made people salivate. "This fish head smells so good." Abraham swallowed and could not help but exclaim. "Calm. Wonderful book house." Chapter 1207. On the other side, Randy had already closed his eyes. He leaned forward slowly and sniffed carefully. His slender brows raised slightly, and he frowned slightly in surprise. "It's different from the spicy grilled fish's aroma. There's a tinge of sourness in this spicy aroma. It's not too aggressive. Instead, it's like a gentleman's. The aroma of the fish is very special. It's not like the river fish near Chaos City. It doesn't have any fishy or muddy smell. The fresh aroma of the fish isn't covered by the chili. Instead, it's brought out by the sour and spicy aroma. The hot oil that was poured onto the fish head at the end was the real finishing touch. The boiling hot oil perfectly blended the chopped chili, seasoning, and fish. Just the fragrance alone was enough to make my stomach start to look forward to it. Gulp. Upon hearing Randy's words, the sounds of people swallowing their saliva could be heard. They couldn't smell the aroma, but they seemed to have tasted it. This was probably the explanation of having a taste. It's indeed different to be cultured. You can gulp so much just by smelling it, but I can only say it smells good, Abraham said sourly. Randy opened his eyes. He didn't mind Abraham's sour words, and smilingly said, "The aroma is complete. Only this aroma is left. I need to test it." He picked up his chopsticks, and picked up a small piece of chopped chili. "Why are you eating the red chili instead of the fish?" Abraham asked with a perplexed look on his face. "This chili seems to be different from normal chili. It's also different from the chili in the spicy grilled fish. I want to know what's the secret hidden here." "Naturally, I have to taste it myself," Randy answered casually before putting that small piece of chopped chili into his mouth. The sourness and spiciness blossomed on the tip of his tongue. The spiciness wasn't very strong, but the sourness stimulated the secretion of saliva in his mouth. Apart from that, there was also a tinge of saltiness. It was as if it had been placed in an old jar for a whole year to brew this sourness and spiciness. This reminded him of the bowl of pickled cabbage noodles that the lady boss of a small inn treated him to when he was staying in a small town a few years ago. That was the most delicious noodles he had ever eaten. Until now, he still often thought of that brown old jar in the corner of the kitchen. Those few pieces of pickled cabbage brought him a bowl of delicious noodles. After that, he had traveled to many places, but he had never tasted anything like it again. That feeling was just like that of the charming lady boss. That crazy rainy night, after finishing their noodles, they went from the kitchen to the bedroom, knocking over the oil and salt jars, leaving messy marks in every corner of the shabby hotel. They exhausted all their strength. He had never met a woman who was sour with a hint of sweetness. However, in this chopped pepper, he found that taste. Although it was chili, the sour taste immediately evoked his memories. He firmly believed that there must be an old pot in the corner of Mr. Mac's kitchen. It was just that it wasn't pickled vegetables, but chili. "How is it? Is it spicy?" Abel asked curiously. It was rare that Randy didn't respond for a long time. The other customers were also concerned. This aroma was described by Randy to be so tempting, but the spiciness was the most important thing. Abraham's words pulled Randy back from his memories. He nodded, shook his head, and said with a smile, "This chili is like a handsome, gentle, and courteous gentleman. It's awe-inspiring, but I can't help but open my legs, my mouth." After soaking it, the spiciness mellowed, and the naturally formed sour taste gave it a unique taste. "Seeing that you can still talk so much after eating it, it doesn't seem to be that spicy." Abraham nodded thoughtfully and was ready to order. "Now, let me try this fish head." Randy peeled the chopped pepper, revealing the white and tender fish meat underneath. He picked up a piece of fish meat, dipped it in the red soup, and put it into his mouth. The sour and spicy soup was the first to bloom, instantly activating the taste buds in his mouth. His teeth bit into the fish meat easily. It was tender and bouncy, fat but not greasy. Although the sour and spicy taste had already soaked the fish head, it still couldn't wipe away the freshness of the fish meat itself. It was completely different from the small fish in the rivers of Chaos City, and also different from any fish he had ever eaten. It was a nobler taste. The wonderful texture and the wonderful sour and spicy taste were like a fireball exploding in his mind. It made his scalp go numb. "Is this fish steamed?" Randy looked at the fish in front of him in disbelief. It wasn't that he hadn't eaten steamed fish before. If the heat was right, the fish meat could indeed become fresh and tender. However, the biggest problem with steamed fish was that fishy smell that was difficult to get rid of. Even the best chef could only use some side dishes to cover it up, and couldn't get rid of it completely. It became the biggest flaw. However, the fish head in front of him was different. Apart from the freshness of the fish meat, he didn't taste any fishy smell at all. The chopped pepper that covered the fish head added a sour and spicy taste to the fish head, but it didn't cover up the freshness of the fish meat itself. Maybe it was because this unique fish really didn't have any fishy smell, or maybe Mr. Mac used a special method to get rid of the fishy smell, leaving only a wonderful aftertaste. Randy swallowed the fish meat, and felt the warm current that made his scalp go numb. He looked at the people who were looking at him expectantly, and smilingly said, "This wonderful taste can't be described with words. I can only write it down slowly when I go back." If you want to know what this taste is, please pay attention to the next episode of Mediterraneanism. Tisk. Everyone clicked their tongues at the same time before raising their hands to place their orders. "Miss Mia, please give me a serving of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. I'd like 200 grams of noodles too." Abraham was the first to raise his hand. He had already confirmed that this was a delicacy that he would regret if he missed it. "I'd like one too." The customers began to place their orders. As long as it wasn't spicier than the insanely spicy grilled fish, everything was fine. As he listened to Mia's orders, he reached out and grabbed a fathead fish. He sighed and said, "Master Fatty, go in peace. Remember, the knife that killed you is called fathead fish. You didn't die in vain at all." Smack. He raised the knife, and that fathead fish that was glaring at him with its big blue eyes was sliced into two perfectly. Then, it was cleaned very quickly, and placed on the steamer. Chaos School. After class, Amy, who was crouching by the window to kill mosquitoes with explosive fireballs, saw Ignacio, who was pacing back and forth hesitantly outside the magic classroom. She flicked her finger, and the explosive fireball that was flying towards the sky immediately changed direction, and slid past Ignacio's face. Whoa! Ignacio jumped back in shock. The green bean sprout on top of his head swayed, and his gaze followed the explosive fireball into the sky. Then, it exploded into fireworks all over the sky. "Hey, little bean sprout, what are you doing here?" Amy asked with a smile. Ignacio looked up at Amy hesitantly, and said, "Amy, someone wants to fight with me." Chapter 1208. Fight. Amy's eyes lit up, but she quickly covered her mouth. She turned around and whispered to Ignacio, "Wait a minute, I'll come out." "Okay." Ignacio nodded. Amy quickly snuck out of the magic room. She looked at Ignacio with a smile, and said, "Little bean sprout, someone actually wants to fight with you." "Yes, and it's a group fight. The kind where a lot of people fight together." Ignacio nodded. "Why would they want to fight with you? Can't they just beat you up? You don't look like you can beat anyone at all." Amy asked 3 questions in a row. "Am I really that weak?" Ignacio felt like he had been dealt a heavy blow, but he quickly shrugged. A hint of helplessness appeared on his chubby face, and he said, "When I came to school this morning, the little tyrant gang bullied me and Daphne, and they wanted us to give them all our pocket money. Because I couldn't beat them, I asked them to fight with me." Amy's little face stiffened, and she said angrily, "How dare they bully Daphne? Let's go, I'll beat them until they cry." No, not now. We've already agreed to settle it in the alley outside the school after school today. It's against the rules if we go now." Ignacio hurriedly stopped Amy, and shook his head anxiously. The little bean sprout on top of his head also swayed. "Okay, then tell them not to leave after school." Amy nodded. That's what they just told me. Ignatsu said meekly. Asterisk ring 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 asterisk the bell for class rang. I'm going to class first. Remember to come after school. The little fatty was shocked. He waved at Amy and ran toward the classroom. I really don't know what to do with you guys. Looks like there's too little homework. Amy sighed and turned to go back to the magic room. What's wrong? That little fatty asked little Amy to fight with him. Crassus asked with a smile as soon as Amy entered the room. Yes, little Beansprout said that someone bullied him and Daphne and even wanted to beat them up. Master, should I help them? Amy nodded honestly. Being able to help and protect our friends in times of need is the purpose of learning magic. Crassus nodded with a smile. However, he continued, the students of Chaos School can still be considered as enemies. Even if you attack them, you have to restrain yourself. Just give them a light punishment. Don't make things worse. Small punishment. Can't we just kill them all? Amy was a little puzzled. That's right. We will only use the most powerful means to kill those who threaten your life and the lives of your friends. Amy will need to learn how to observe and analyze the situation in order to protect the people you want to protect without bringing trouble to others, Crassus said with a smile. Amy thought for a moment and asked, but if you can solve the problem with a fireball, why go through so much trouble? If I can't use the most powerful magic, then why do I have to keep learning more powerful magic? Learning more powerful magic is so that when you meet more powerful opponents, you will have the same ability to deal with them. This is the upper limit. Crassus shook his head with a smile. Of course, a problem that can be solved with a fireball is not a problem at all. Then, those fellows who bullied Little Beansprout and Daphne, what are they? Weak and detestable opponents. No, they just don't have enough homework. I will go and have a chat with Novin tonight, Crassus said with a serious expression. The Little Tyrant Gang, the top power in the kindergarten of Chaos School, was a mysterious gang formed by powerhouses from the 1st to 6th grades. In recent years, they had appeared at the school's toilets and entrances. After the school bell rang, a group of primary school students with their left ankles exposed quickly gathered at the corner of the field. There were about 15 to 16 of them. A tall and skinny primary school student stood on a rock. He looked at everyone with a serious expression and said, "Today is the 3rd anniversary of the establishment of the Little Tyrant Gang. My brothers have been with me for over 100 days and nights, and built this huge foundation. We have a place for ourselves in the underworld of Chaos School. But today, there is a little fatty with a bean sprout on his head in the preschool class, and he wants to have a gang fight with our Lankum of the left. He is openly provoking us, the Little Tyrant Gang. He is looking down on me and all of you. Tell me, what should we do? Beat him up. Beat him up. Beat him up." All the primary school students answered in unison. They were rather agitated. Very good. A sinister smile appeared on Little Tyrant Bolton's face. He took out a pink wand from his backpack and raised it high above his head. A pink light shone from the wand and landed on the bodies of the primary school students like pollen. All the primary school students' eyes lit up as though they had been injected with hormones. They followed Bolton valiantly to the school gate. At the school gate, Daphne looked at Ignatsu with a conflicted expression and said, "Ignatsu, let's tell the teacher about this. I don't think it's a good idea to have a gang fight." "Don't worry, Daphne. I will protect you." Ignatsu looked around the school and patted his chest as he promised. Daphne shook her head and sighed. "I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that you will be beaten to tears. Do I look like someone who will cry?" Ignatsu's breathing stagnated, and his expression was a little unnatural. "Then why are you shaking your legs?" Daphne looked at Ignatsu's 2 chubby little legs that were shaking. I'm just warming up. Ignatsu pretended to jump on the spot. His legs gave way, and he almost fell. A tall and chubby primary school student came to Bolton's side, and pointed at Ignatsu, who was standing at the gate, as he said, "Boss, it's that little fatty." Bolton looked around. There was a skinny little girl beside the little fatty. He couldn't help but frown, and said, "He won't just bring a little girl to have a gang fight with us, right? Our little tyrant's rule is to not hit girls. We can't break it because of this little fatty." I saw how confident he was in the morning, so I thought he could really get a big group of people to come. I didn't expect him to only bring a little girl. Lancome had an innocent look on her face. "Forget it. Even if he's alone, we have to follow the rules. We can't ruin our reputation. Otherwise, people will say that our little tyrant is afraid of a little fatty." Bolton waved his hand, and walked straight to Ignatsu. He stopped beside him, and sneered, "Little fatty, we will wait for you in front. If you have the guts, bring your people over." Chapter 1209. Do you know who my big sister is? Let me tell you, none of you are leaving. Just wait here. Ignatsu was so scared that the little bean sprout on top of his head was bent. Big sister. Bolton stared blankly for a moment before he smiled and said, "I really want to know who your big sister is. I've never heard of any big sisters in the Sprout Garden. If she can protect you today, then our little overlords will follow her in the future. All right, we'll wait for you in the alley. Don't even think about running away. We're all watching you. If you don't come back in 10 minutes, we'll come over," Bolton said with a smile as he turned around and walked towards the alley not far away. The primary school students of the Little Tyrant gang also followed behind Bolton valiantly. If it weren't for the fact that their pink wands were too flirtatious, and their heavy backpacks filled with books looked a little cute as they swayed back and forth, they would really look like members of society. However, Ignatsu didn't find them adorable at all. Bolton was said to be a magic caster. Even the lowest level magic caster could easily defeat him. Of course, even if he wasn't a magic caster, he could easily subdue him with his height and weight as a 6th grade student. Many students passed by, and looked at Ignatsu with pity. This little fatty actually provoked the Little Tyrant gang. Wasn't he asking for trouble? Why hasn't Amy come out yet? Ignatsu stomped his feet anxiously. He only had 2 friends, Daphne and Amy. Although Daphne's father and grandfather were both excellent hunters, Daphne was a good girl, and couldn't provide him with any help at all. "Why don't we run away?" Daphne whispered. "My grandfather said that if you meet an opponent that you can't beat, being able to escape ingeniously is also a kind of ability. No, as a man, I will not allow the word escape to be branded in my life." Ignatsu shook his head firmly. He looked around, and saw that the Little Tyrant gang's people were guarding both sides of the street. Even if they wanted to run, there was nowhere to run. Most of the students had left, and the crowd at the school gate gradually thinned out. However, they still didn't see Amy. "Don't tell me Amy has already gone home to eat." Ignatsu pursed his lips dejectedly. Although Uncle Meg's food was indeed delicious, it would be terrible for him if she really forgot about the gang fight and ran home to eat. "If Amy agrees, then don't worry. She will definitely come," Daphne said confidently. "Amy is the most trustworthy person. But if she doesn't come now, it will be too late," Ignatsu said with a melancholy expression as he looked at Lancome, who was standing at the entrance of the alley and waving at him. This big fatty who weighed at least 150 kilograms could flatten a little fatty like him with just his butt. It was precisely because of this size that he was basically unrivaled in the Green Bud Garden. He was the #1 vicious dog under Little Tyrant Bolton. "It's all right. As long as we stand here, they won't dare to come over," Daphne said with a relaxed expression. No, I promised them 10 minutes, so it will be 10 minutes. As a man, I can't break my promise. Ignatius shook his head. He reached out to hold the 3 seeds in his pocket, and whispered to Daphne, Daphne, stand at the entrance of the alley later and don't go over. Little Tyrant's principle is not to hit girls, so they won't do anything to you. I will attack them first later. No matter how many I can hit, you have to watch carefully. I am not an idiot, nor am I a coward. Good luck. I have faith in you. Daphne clenched her little fist and encouraged him. Shouldn't you stop me at this time? Ignatius glared at her. Why? I think you are right. It's okay if a man can't win, but those who don't dare to fight are all cowards, Daphne said with a smile. I am not a coward. I am Ignatius, a plant-type combat master. Ignatius' gaze became determined as he walked toward the alley. Amy, hurry up and come. Daphne prayed in her heart as she followed behind Ignatius. Boss, they are here, Lancome shouted toward the alley. How many? Bolton asked. Just 2, that little fatty and that little girl. Lancome smiled and said, looks like that little fatty really doesn't have any friends. He actually dares to fight with us. Everyone in the alley also laughed out loud. This was the dominance of the Little Tyrant gang. Ignatius walked to the entrance of the alley with heavy footsteps. He was stunned when he saw the primary school students leaning against the wall with their backpacks. This was different from the Little Tyrant gang he had imagined. It was supposed to be a domineering scene. Instead, it was a group of licentious Taisway holding long and short sabers. Their eyes were full of arrogance, as if they could pierce through the sky with a raise of their legs. That was what he imagined a gang to be like. But their thin shoulders were bent under the weight of their heavy backpacks. They leaned against the wall as if they were punished by the teacher to stand at the door of the classroom. Even the smile on their faces gave off a simple and honest feeling. As for Bolton, who called himself the Little Tyrant, he had a backpack slung over his shoulder and a pink wand in his hand. His rolled-up trousers revealed a section of pink socks, which instantly made that evil smile lose its deterrence. You guys have really disappointed me. Ignatius sighed. He felt as if his fantasy had been shattered. He had also thought of joining the Little Tyrant gang to experience that domineering feeling. He didn't expect that reality would be completely different from what he had imagined. The Little Tyrant gang members in the alley, who had already put on what they thought was the most domineering posture, were all stunned. They looked at Ignatius in confusion. Why did this little fatty who was about to be beaten up look so heartbroken? Bolton was also stunned. He said in a low voice, I say, go, Demon Vine. Ignatius took his hand out of his pocket, and flung it at Bolton and the rest. 3 black seeds flew out and landed at the feet of Bolton, Lancome, and a senior student respectively. Demon Vine. Bolton took a look at that seed, and lifted his leg to stomp it into the ground. He smirked, and pointed the wand in his hand at Ignatius. Beat him up. Crack. Crack. Right at this moment, a black vine sprang out from the ground like a huge black snake, and wrapped itself around Bolton's legs instantly. Almost at the same time, the seeds that Bolton and that student had stomped into the ground also grew out black vines. They started to grow crazily from their feet, and tied them up like dumplings. Hey! Grandpa Fatty is here! Ignatius yelled, and ran towards the dumbfounded Bolton with his short and thick legs. Chapter 12:10. 3 black vines grew crazily from the ground, and successfully trapped Bolton, Lancome, and Ignatius, who suddenly sped up, crashed into Bolton like a meatball. The tall and skinny Bolton was entangled, and could not cast any spells in time. He could only watch as Ignatsu crashed into him and fell to the ground. Little Tyrant, right? Today, I will be the one who punches Little Tyrant. Ignatsu rolled on the ground, and jumped up nimbly. He rode on Bolton's neck, and punched him twice in the face. The members of the Little Tyrant gang in the alley were still in a state of confusion. How did this bloated little fatty suddenly tie up the gang leader and the left emissary? How did he suddenly speed up, knock Little Tyrant down, and ride on him to attack crazily? Is Ignatsu that brave? Daphne, who was standing at the entrance of the alley, opened her mouth slightly. Her little face was full of shock, and she could not believe that this was the Ignatsu she knew. Ah! Catch this little fatty and beat him up. Bolton yelled as he recovered from the shock after being punched twice. The other primary school students also reacted, and went forward to pull Ignatsu away. However, the black vines were too tough. They did not have any knives on them, so they could only watch helplessly. On the other hand, after Ignatsu was pulled away, he was punched and kicked. Although he tried his best to wave his chubby little hands, it was in vain. He kept retreating, and even had a nosebleed. Why, you guys, stop hitting him. Daphne was so anxious that she wanted to rush forward. We don't hit girls, but don't barge into our men's world. This is not something you can interfere in. A tall and skinny boy stood in front of Daphne, and directly blocked her way with a serious face. Daphne tried to break through, but she could not get through. She could only stand there and watch anxiously as Ignatsu was beaten up. Oh, right. Amy gave me the cloud-piercing arrow. Daphne suddenly thought of something. She felt around in her bag and took out a small stick the length of a chopstick. She looked at everyone and said solemnly, "If you don't stop, I'm going to call for help." The alley suddenly fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the small stick in Daphne's hand and then burst into laughter. Go ahead. I'd like to see who you can call. Bolton, who was helped up from the ground, moved his wrist, and aimed his wand at Ignatsu. He sneered, "Little fatty, how dare you hit my face? I'm going to turn you into a pig's head today. A cloud-piercing arrow, and an army of thousands will come to meet me." Daphne repeated the command that Amy had taught her before, and then twisted the bottom of the stick. Swish! Bang! A fiery red firework rose into the sky and then exploded in the sky, turning into a bright fireball. It can really be released. The members of the Little Tyrant gang looked up at the fireball in the sky with a surprised expression. Their gang was still at the level of shouting when calling for help. They didn't expect this little girl to be able to use such a high-level signal flare. She's just bluffing. If she could really call for help, why would she wait until now? Bolton pursed his lips, and a hint of envy flashed across his eyes as he looked at the fireball. He definitely wouldn't be able to create such an advanced item at his current level. Then, he looked at Ignatsu again, and chanted a spell. His pink wand lit up with a faint pink glow. He pointed it at Ignatsu, and shouted, "Transform, Pink Piggy." This was the spell that Bolton was famous for. It could use magic to turn someone's head into a pig's head, but it wouldn't cause any substantial damage to the target. However, being pointed at by others after becoming a pig's head was not as comfortable as being beaten up. Ignatsu's eyes widened. No! Daphne exclaimed. The members of the Little Tyrant gang had expectant smiles on their faces. The little fatty's body shape and a pink piggy head should be a good match. Reflect, reflect. At this moment, a soft voice sounded from above everyone. A multifaceted prism made of ice suddenly appeared around Ignatsu, who was surrounded by everyone. The pink light beam released by Bolton landed on the prism, and instantly refracted into dozens of pink light beams that flew in all directions and landed on the members of the gang. Ah! Everyone exclaimed as their heads were shrouded in pink fog. After a while, the fog dissipated, and all the members of the little tyrant gang in the alley had turned into pink piggy heads. There were slight differences according to the size of their heads. Ignatzu, who had already closed his eyes and accepted his fate, opened his eyes. He was stunned when he saw the piggy heads around him. What's going on? There are so many pink piggies. Daphne smiled as she looked at the piggy heads in the alley. And my head. Bolton was still tied up, but he could already see his unusual pink nose. He couldn't help but exclaim. Who knew what that ice wall was? Sorry, I'm late. At this moment, a figure flapping a pair of invisible wings descended from the sky and said apologetically, I'm sorry. Amy. You're finally here. Daphne immediately jumped into Amy's arms and said excitedly. My big sister, you're finally here. I was almost beaten to death. Ignatzu finally heaved a sigh of relief and sat down on the ground. He looked at the piggy heads around him and said with a silly smile, but the little tyrant gang seems to have become the piggy gang now. It's her. It's her. Our little hero. The members of the little tyrant gang were shocked and they saw Amy descending from the sky. She left a deep impression on them when she single-handedly defeated the Imperial Magic Caster team that came to challenge them. However, Ignatzu's words made them facepalm again. It's over now. The prestige that the little tyrant gang had accumulated over the past 3 years is all gone now. Bolton looked at Amy and swallowed his saliva. He didn't dare to move. She was someone who could take on a mid-tier magic caster single-handedly. He was only a second-tier magic caster who didn't know any offensive magic. He had no right to jump in front of her. Good girl. Amy patted Daphne's head lovingly. Then, she looked at the members of the little tyrant gang in the alley. She stretched out her right hand, and a ball of purplish gold flame danced slowly in her palm. She asked cutely, anyone else? Plop. The tied-up Bolton's legs went soft, and he knelt down in front of Amy on the spot. He said sincerely, please accept us, big sister Amy. We, the little tyrant gang, are willing to follow you through life and death. Seeing this, the members of the little tyrant gang hesitated for a moment before they also half knelt on the ground, and said in unison, we're willing to follow you. Follow me. A hint of doubt appeared on Amy's face. She stared at them for a while, and then shook her head. No, you're too weak. Everyone looked at each other. Compared to Amy, they were indeed very weak. Little bean sprout, come to my house for dinner today. It's almost time. Let's hurry, Amy said to Ignatzu. Seeing that no one had any intention of resisting, she suddenly felt a little bored. Let's go to your house for dinner. Ignatzu, who was originally sitting on the ground, suddenly jumped up. He picked up the school bag that was thrown aside, carried it on his back, and ran excitedly toward the entrance of the alley. The 3 children gradually disappeared into the sunset. Boss, what should we do now? Lancome said with a long face. The little tyrant gang's reputation had been completely lost this time. Since big sister Amy doesn't like us now, then we have to work harder in our cultivation. We have to reach a level where we can make her like us as soon as possible, Bolton said with a determined gaze. At the entrance of the restaurant, Meg looked at the fully armed Connie and reminded her, be careful on your way back. Send the things to the Bowtie prison, then hand them over to their deputy warden, Sir Rex. You can come back after that. Chapter 12:11. Don't worry, I'll complete the mission perfectly, Connie replied confidently as she pedaled away. As if. Meg looked at Connie's receding figure and sighed in his heart. He doubted his decision to take her in as a waitress again. Mr. Mac, who was that just now? Why was she dressed so mysteriously? Harrison asked curiously. Judging from the girl's figure, she didn't look like one of the restaurant's waitresses. The restaurant's newly recruited delivery person, Meg replied casually. He was about to turn and enter the restaurant. "Father, can I bring Daphne and little Beansprout to eat at home today?" Just then, Amy came out of the bushes with Daphne and Ignacio. They had taken a shortcut back. "Hello, Uncle Meg." Daphne and Ignacio also greeted Meg. "Of course." Meg plucked a dead leaf from Amy's head with a smile. Then, he looked at Ignacio, who was hiding behind with his school uniform pulled up high to cover his face. There were many shoe prints on his clothes and bag, and there were also 2 fingernail prints on his forehead. He couldn't help but ask curiously, what happened to little Beansprout? "He went to fight with others," Daphne answered quickly. Then, she held Amy's little hand and said with a smile, "Luckily, Amy came and turned those people into pig heads." "Gang fight?" Meg was slightly taken aback. A child at such a young age actually knew how to fight in a gang. No wonder Amy came back late today. He thought the Crassus had delayed the school. With Amy's strength, it was no problem for her to beat up Nanshan Kindergarten and Beihai Nursing Home. However, Amy didn't know how to control her strength sometimes, so he didn't know if she had hurt anyone. He stopped smiling and looked at Amy. "Amy, what's going on here?" "Someone bullied Daphne and little Beansprout, demanded pocket money from them, and even beat them up in the alleyway. So, I used the rebounding ice mirror to reflect the spell cast by that little baddie," Amy answered obediently. Daphne also quickly said, "They wanted to turn Ignacio into a pig's head, so Amy turned them all into pigs' heads." "Uncle Meg, Amy didn't do anything wrong. That spell is only effective for a day. It will disappear automatically when the time is up," Ignacio added. "Looks like Amy is the little magician who protected her little friend." Meg looked at the 3 of them with a smile on his face. He opened the door of the restaurant and said, "Our 3 warriors have just gone through a fierce battle. Let's go in and have a meal to replenish our energy. Let's eat." The 3 children all had happy smiles on their faces. "By the way, Daphne and Ignacio, do your parents know that you came back with Amy?" "If they don't, they might be worried," Meg asked as he looked at the 3 of them who were washing their hands in the line. Daphne nodded and said, "We met my grandfather on the way here. I already told him, and he said that he would come to the restaurant to pick me up later. I'm fine. They won't be around no matter when I come home." Ignacio shrugged as a hint of sadness flashed across his eyes. Meg also knew that Ignacio's parents were workaholics. Seeing that Ignacio's nose was stuffed with cotton and there were many scratches on his face, he couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He smiled and said, "Uncle will give you a bowl of tofu pudding. After you eat it, the scars on your face will be gone when you wake up tomorrow. Then can I have a sweet one?" Ignacio's eyes lit up with anticipation. "I like sweet tofu pudding." "Of course." Meg nodded before turning to Daphne. "Daphne, what flavor do you want?" "I like savory tofu pudding," Daphne blurted out. "I want all of them." Amy raised her little hand, too. "All right. After you wash your hands, find a table and sit down obediently. I will make something delicious for you," Meg said with a smile. The 3 children left the kitchen and turned to play with Anna and Ugly Duckling. Poor Ugly Duckling. Its round face was pinched into a square one moment, and then into a triangle the next, but it just lay there and didn't dare to move. Meg made dinner for the 3 children, a plate of Yangzhou fried rice for each of them. He looked at the time, and it was exactly 5:00 sharp, so he opened for business. The steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers at noon was unanimously praised by the customers, so many customers brought their friends over to try it in the evening. It was a very popular dish. When the busy evening business hours started, Meg couldn't be bothered with the children anymore as he busied himself in the kitchen. However, the little ones were very obedient. After they finished their fried rice and tofu pudding, they each took an ice cream and went upstairs to play. Amy's playground was their heaven. Daphne's grandfather came to pick her up not long after, and Ignatsu also went home after saying goodbye. At about 8 o'clock, Yabamiya walked into the kitchen with a pile of plates, and worriedly said, "It's already 8 o'clock and Connie hasn't returned yet. Could something have happened?" Meg, who was flipping the skewers, was shocked. He was so busy that he forgot that Connie had gone to deliver food. It was only a 10-minute ride from here to the main entrance of the Bawtai prison. She had been out for 3 hours, and she still hadn't returned. Wasn't this too abnormal? Could Big Sister Connie have gotten lost? Anna whispered. "I don't think she has any sense of direction. How can she get lost when she's next door?" Elizabeth was puzzled. That was what Meg wanted to complain about, but on second thought, with that fellow's brain circuit, it wasn't impossible for something like that to happen. Of course, it would be fine if she just got lost. Meg was just worried that she would do something ridiculous. There were still many orcs outside looking for her. She was really troublesome. There's still an hour before the closing time. Let's go look for her then. Meg looked at the full number of customers outside. No one could leave now, so even if she really got lost, she could only wander outside for a while. Okay. Everyone nodded, and continued to get busy. Deputy Warden, the prison has been invaded. A prison guard rushed into the Deputy Warden's office in a panic. An invasion had never happened since the Bawtai prison was built. Phew, I was almost discovered. Why is this house so big? There's an entrance on the left and an exit on the right. After going underground, there's still so much space. Where exactly is the Deputy Warden's room? Connie, who was wearing a blue jacket and a helmet, leaned against the corner of the wall and hid in the shadows. She let out a sigh of relief. When the footsteps were far away, she looked at the three-forked passageway in front of her. Her face was full of hesitation. I'm so tired. Weak, pitiful, helpless. I want to give up. Connie mumbled pitifully. They said it was just next door, and I could get there in no time. They didn't tell me how to get to such a big house, and I even had to climb over such a high wall to get in, no pop-up window. Chapter 12:12. Invasion. Lex looked at the frantic prison guard and was a little confused. Someone has entered the prison. Yes, they should be underground now, but the location of the invader has not been confirmed yet. The prison guard nodded, his forehead full of cold sweat. The Bawtai prison had been established for 100 years, and almost no mistakes had ever happened. It was known as the most impenetrable prison on the mainland, but in just a few days, there had been consecutive breakouts and invasions. It was simply unbelievable. Of course, the most unbelievable person who had broken out of the prison was standing in front of him now. It was said that because he was the first prisoner in the history of the Bawtai prison to successfully break out of the prison, the city lord had made an exception and appointed him as the deputy warden. Such a strange reward brought a lot of pressure to the prison guards in the Bawtai prison. The prisoners who were originally obedient and resigned to their fate had recently started to crazily attempt to break out of the prison in order to achieve their goal of becoming the deputy warden. Now, not only were the prisoners inside eager to break out of the prison, but there were also people outside who had invaded the prison. There were many serious criminals in the Bawtai prison, and many of them were criminals with extremely high abilities and statuses. If this was a premeditated prison break, things might develop to an uncontrollable stage. Just follow your plan. Look for me when you need me to take action, Lex said. He had only been the warden for a few days, so he was not very clear about the various rules and matters in the Bawtai prison. He did not want to give orders carelessly and cause chaos. Yes. The prison guard responded and turned to leave. The Bawtai prison did indeed have a mature plan to deal with invasions, and it was often practiced. Oh yes, did anyone send anything over just now? Lex suddenly asked. No visitors today. The prison guard shook his head. All right, you may go. Lex raised her hand, and the prison guard left. She was the only one left in the office. Did Mr. Mack forget about it because he was too busy? He said it would be at 5:00. Why hasn't it been delivered yet? Lex muttered to herself. Mamie's office was quite close to the prison, but since there was an invader now, he could not leave his post. He had to capture the mysterious invader first. Someone actually dared to invade the Bawtai prison. They are really bold. I wonder which tribe they are from. Shit, 3 tunnels again. What kind of place is this? Why are they locking people up in small houses? Connie stood at the crossroads of life once again. She looked at the 3 eerie paths with a conflicted expression. She had seen many small houses along the way. There were all kinds of races locked up in them, but all of them looked very fierce. She didn't dare to ask for directions, and just walked over quietly. Connie. In the dark passage, there was a dim oil lamp every 10 meters. There was a damp and moldy smell mixed with feces in the air, and the snoring sound was like thunder. Connie carried the incubator in her hand and walked forward cautiously. She looked at the men locked behind the iron bars. Hello, do you know how I can become the deputy warden? Who? She was answered by a series of thunderous snoring. Little girl, are you here to look for the deputy warden? A sinister voice sounded from the cell next door. Yes. Do you know where he is? I've been looking for him for a long time, but I can't find him. Connie walked to the cell next door. A skinny old goblin in dark green leaned against the bars and looked at her with a smile. Why are you looking for the deputy warden? He's not someone that just anyone can meet. The goblin stared at Connie. He could not tell what tribe she was from because she was wearing a special mask. However, he was sure that she was not a warden. I'm here to deliver food to him. He ordered takeout from our restaurant, Connie answered honestly. She looked at the goblin and said, Can you tell me where he is now? I have to get the food to him as soon as possible. Otherwise, the soup will get cold. Of course I can tell you where he is. But this underground palace is too complicated. I'm afraid you won't remember even if I tell you. Why don't you let me out first? I'll take you to him, the goblin said with a smile. His protruding eyeballs rolled around in his eye sockets. Let you out. Connie looked at the bars between them. There was a big lock on the door next to them. Yes. Let me out, and I'll take you to the deputy warden. Then you can finish your job, the goblin said with a bright smile. By the way, you're a goblin, right? Connie suddenly asked. The goblin was stunned for a moment. He nodded and said, Why yes. Goodbye. Connie turned to leave. Hey. Little girl, don't go. I can really take you to the deputy warden. The goblin said anxiously as he grabbed onto the bars. Father told me not to make deals with goblins. You guys are the best at lying, Connie said without turning back. Although she was very smart, she still had to listen to her father. After walking around randomly, Connie felt that she had gone down another 2 levels. Originally, she was prepared to ask those mysterious people for directions, but along the way, she didn't meet a single one. Did you find him? Just now, a prisoner said that he saw a person with an especially big head walk past the first level. But that level has been searched thoroughly, and we didn't find anyone suspicious. Seal off the exits of every level, and focus on searching between the 1st to 5th levels. Send the signal immediately if you find him. Yes, sir. The prison guards hurriedly ran through the prison's passageways. This intruder was extremely cunning and had actually managed to avoid all the traps and patrols. So far, no one had seen him, and they could only hear sporadic descriptions from the prisoners who were locked up. Ding ding ding. Warning. The intruder is on the 4th level. First order incident. Requesting backup. At this moment, an ear-piercing alarm rang throughout the Bawtai prison. The powerhouses in charge of guarding the perimeter and the deeper parts of the prison rushed to the 4th level at the same time. Someone had invaded the 4th level. This was a disgrace to the entire Bawtai prison. What is this? Why does it scream? At a crossroad, Connie kicked something that looked like a giant snail, her face full of curiosity. Who is it? Raise your hands. At this moment, dense footsteps sounded from all 4 passageways. A blinding light shone on Connie's body. A group of mages and knights rushed out from the passageways and shouted anxiously. I'm just a delivery guy. Looking at the crowd that suddenly appeared, Connie innocently raised the thermal box in her hand and said weakly, Chapter 12-13. A Delivery Man. The 4 tunnels were filled with wardens. There were many level 7 and level 8 knights and mages, but they did not act rashly. They were all stunned when they heard the words of the mysterious person who had snuck into the 4th floor. This person did not look big, but he was wearing a strange-shaped mask that covered his entire head. He was wearing a strange-looking shirt with the words, "Are you full?" written on the back. He looked extremely creepy. To be able to sneak past the high walls of the Bawtai prison, sneak into the 4th floor, and avoid all the patrolling guards, this person must be very powerful and talented. They had to be careful. Speak. Who are you here to rob? A warden shouted. Rob who? I'm not here to rob anyone, I'm here to deliver food. It's just that this place is too big, and I got lost while walking around. Don't stare at me like that, I'm scared. Connie was so aggrieved that she was about to cry. Was it easy for her? She had walked around in circles for hours in such a lousy place, and now she was surrounded. What did these fierce-looking people want to do to her? Humph. Don't put on an act. If you don't tell the truth, don't blame us for being rude. Although that person sounded like a little girl, the wardens did not let down their guard. There were all kinds of prisoners in the Bawtai prison. They had seen the bull demon king who had a lowly's voice. This person with a mask covering his face might be an ugly thing. I'm telling the truth, I'm really just a delivery man, and I got lost by accident. Connie was so anxious that she was sweating profusely. Was she, who was as beautiful as a flower, going to die here? Have you caught the intruder? A low voice sounded from behind them. Everyone made a path, and Rex walked forward. His gaze landed on Connie, and his thick eyebrows were knitted together. A warden answered, "Yes, Deputy Warden. We have successfully locked onto the intruder, but she insisted that she was not an intruder. She said that she got lost." Getting lost in the Bawtai prison, what a ridiculous reason. Looks like this is a stubborn intruder. Let's judge him on the spot. Lex said in a low voice. Her right hand was clenched into a fist. If she got off work now, she could still go next door for supper. Deputy Warden. Connie, who was anxiously pacing back and forth, suddenly had a gleam in her eyes. She looked at the burly man with short, thick hair standing in front of everyone. She raised the insulated box in her hand and exclaimed in delight, "It's you. You were the one who ordered the takeout. I finally found you." Lex was stunned as she retracted her fist. Buddha jumps over the wall. It's your Buddha jumps over the wall, Connie said as she opened the insulated box and uncovered the small jar inside. A rich and alluring fragrance instantly gushed out, and then surged into the 4 tunnels. It smells so good. All of the prison guards' eyes lit up as they stared at the thermal container in Connie's hand with incredulity. What kind of food was this? How could it give off such an alluring aroma? Buddha jumps over the wall. Lex's eyes lit up as well. He was very familiar with this aroma. His thick hair grew out from the daily servings of Buddha jumps over the wall. Only Mr. Mac could make Buddha jumps over the wall, and there was a limited amount every day. He sent someone to order one today, and Mr. Mac promised to send someone to deliver it to him at 5:00. However, it hadn't arrived yet. You were sent by Mr. Mac to deliver the food? Lex asked. She still had some doubts in her heart. Deputy Warden, you know this intruder. All of the prison guards were shocked and they heard that, and they felt a little strange. This deputy warden had successfully escaped a few days ago and became the first person to break out of the Bowtie prison. Now, another person who had successfully invaded the Bowtie prison was related to him as well. Yes, Mr. Mac asked me to deliver the food to you. Connie nodded quickly. Finally, there was someone who could understand her. Lex looked at Connie with a scrutinizing gaze and said, You can just deliver the food to the door. Why did you invade the Bowtie prison? And you even came to the 4th basement level. I couldn't find the main door after walking around, so I climbed over the wall and came in. Then, I saw a big house inside. I guessed you must be inside, so I came in. However, the passageway inside was very winding, so I got lost. I walked for a few hours, and my legs were about to break. Connie was angry and aggrieved. She even started to sob in the end. Everyone was silent when they heard that. They felt sorry for her inexplicably. It wasn't because of her misery, but because of her stupidity. Oh my God! What kind of person was this? She could create a first-order incident in the Bowtie prison just by delivering food. Lex loosened her fists, and said to all the prison guards, The alert has been lifted. Everyone, go back to your positions and guard your posts. Bowtie prison doesn't deserve to be called the #1 prison on the Norland continent if even a little girl who delivered food could sneak in. Yes. All the prison guards answered shamefully. They had already confirmed the identity of this intruder through the deputy warden. She was a delivery girl from the restaurant next door. The Bowtie prison, which was known to be impregnable, was successfully invaded by a little girl who delivered food without hurting anyone. If this were to spread out, they would really have nowhere to put their faces. Lex looked at Connie and said, Take the Buddha jumps over the wall and follow me. Okay. Connie covered the small jar obediently, and followed behind Lex with the insulated box. In comparison, this fierce-looking uncle was slightly better. At least he could understand what she was saying, and he was also the target of her mission today. The alarm stopped, and all the prison guards returned to their posts with complicated feelings. All of them were on high alert to guard against new intruders. The same thing must not happen again. Lex brought Connie back to the office above ground. She pointed at the table at the side, and said, Put the Buddha jumps over the wall, there. Okay. Connie took out a small jar of Buddha jumps over the wall, from the insulated box obediently, and placed it on the table gently. She stood at the side with the empty insulated box, and didn't dare to move at all. She only dared to size up Lex from the corner of her eyes. This muscular uncle had an intimidating aura, just like her father. He had to be a very powerful powerhouse. Furthermore, she seemed to have gotten herself into some serious trouble just now. In order to leave this place alive, she decided to be more obedient. However, this room was too warm. She was wearing a thick down jacket and a thermal helmet. The dizziness caused by the heat was attacking her. Are you very hot? Lex, who had sat down at the table, asked Connie. Hot. It's so hot. Connie only had time to take off her helmet before fainting on the ground. Cat ears. Orc. What does this little fellow have to do with the Falk tribe? Lex looked at Connie's pair of cat ears, and stood up immediately as she mumbled to herself. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 12-14. Rex carried the unconscious Connie onto the table and placed his hand gently on her forehead. After making sure that she had fainted from the heat, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. She's exactly the same as that lass back then. She fainted from the heat. He retracted his hand and stared at Connie's face for a while. She had a delicate face, brown curly hair that was drenched in sweat, pinkish white cat ears, and a few freckles on the tip of her nose. She does resemble that lass back then. Even these freckles. Rex murmured in a daze. After a while, he came back to his senses and said with a complicated expression, 100 years have passed. I wonder how she is now. With the lifespan of an orc, she might not be around anymore. Rex stared at Connie for a while and pressed his hand gently on her shoulder. He used a strong source power to drive away the heat in her body. Connie moaned, and slowly opened her eyes. She happened to meet Rex's eyes, and could not help but be shocked. She rolled off the table and onto the floor. Ouch! Connie screamed and got up from the floor while rubbing her butt. She looked at Rex and complained, Uncle, what are you doing? You fainted. I saved you. Rex spread his hands and said calmly. Is that so? Connie thought for a while. She did faint from the heat just now, and there were no traces of being violated on her body. It seemed that this uncle was a decent person. She thanked Rex, thank you. I've already delivered the food. Give me the money, I'm going back. All right. Rex opened the drawer of the table and took out 10 dragon coins and a gold coin for Connie. Then I'm leaving. Goodbye. Connie kept the money and picked up the helmet on the table. She turned around and was about to leave. Do you know Debbie? Rex suddenly asked. Debbie? Connie stopped and thought seriously. She turned around in shock. How do you know my grandmother's name? I knew it. Lex understood. So this little girl was her granddaughter. No wonder she looked so similar to Lex back then. However, it seemed like she still married that guy in the end. Hey, Uncle, I'm asking you. How do you know my grandmother? Connie could not help but ask when she saw Rex in a daze. In an unfamiliar place like Chaos City, she suddenly heard her grandmother's name from a middle-aged man whom she had met for the first time. She was both excited and wary. I've seen your grandmother before. She looks a little like you, so I was just asking. Lex came back to her senses and restrained her expression. She tried to ask as calmly as possible, is she doing well? She passed away. Connie's expression darkened, and his voice became low. After father was killed, she drank the poison and told me to run away from the tribe alone. Is she dead? Rex clenched his fists tightly. The scenes from over 100 years ago kept flashing past his mind. That cat-eared young lady whom he saved by accident chased after him recklessly, and foolishly created one farce after another. Although most of the time, she could only chase after the traces he left behind, and the days that she really spent with him added up to less than a month, the 3 years that he was chased after were probably the 3 years of his life that were slightly colorful in the past. After that, he took his revenge, and had no more goals in life. He was locked up in the Bowtie prison, and was completely isolated from the outside world. Until today, when he saw Connie again, the throbbing in his heart suddenly made him understand his feelings. However, she was already dead. There were some words that he would never have the chance to say to her again. Back then, when my hair reaches my waist, I will marry you, it actually came true. Rex suddenly felt that his heart had become a little empty, as if something important was missing. What is the relationship between this uncle and my grandmother? Connie sized Rex up secretly. She could feel Rex's sadness when he heard the news of her grandmother's death. Buddha jumps over the wall, long hair. Connie glanced at the Buddha jumps over the wall on the table, and her eyes lit up. She looked at Rex and said, "Could it be that uncle is bald? The hairless monk. You are the hairless monk that my grandmother always talks about, right?" She grew up with her grandmother. Ever since she was young, her grandmother had never told her the stories of the folk tribe's heroes. She only told her stories about the hairless monk. That was a superhero without hair. Rex's lips moved as he asked Connie, "Did she mention me to you?" "Of course. I grew up listening to your stories. Grandmother told me again and again. I can even memorize them all." Connie nodded. Her eyes were shining as she looked at the hairless monk. This was the most powerful hero in her heart, and he was actually standing right in front of her now. 100 years have passed. "I didn't expect her to still remember me," Rex murmured with a smile on his lips. In this world, she was probably the only one who could treat him as a hero. In the eyes of the world, he was a great demon who committed all kinds of crimes. Even now, those prison guards were still filled with fear when they faced him. Connie looked at Rex with a burning gaze, and said, "Hairless monk, can you take me in as your disciple? I want to be as powerful as you." "Take you in as a disciple?" Rex looked at Connie. "Why do you want to be my disciple? What happened to the folk tribe now?" "Gary, that big baddie, betrayed us. He killed my father, imprisoned my elder brother, and became the new chief of the folk tribe. I want to become powerful, go back to save my elder brother, and kill that baddie Gary," Connie said with a determined gaze. "Rebellion." Rex frowned. The folk tribe was the second largest tribe among the orcs. They were very powerful, and their chief was not the only 10th-tier powerhouse in the tribe. Killing the chief and becoming the new chief was probably not something that Gary could do. That baddie colluded with a few elders in the tribe, and even received reinforcements from the August tribe. "He is a traitor, and also a traitor," Connie said angrily. Rex was silent for a while. He looked up at the fuming Connie, and calmly asked, "If you want to be my disciple and become a powerhouse, the process will definitely be very tough. You might even suffer a fate worse than death. Can you persevere?" "If I can kill that traitor and save my elder brother, I will definitely persevere." Connie nodded with determination. Rex looked into Connie's eyes, just like that young lady who said to him with determination, "I will definitely catch up to you," more than 100 years ago. "Debbie, I let you down back then. Let me pay it back with your granddaughter," Rex thought to himself. Then, he nodded at Connie, and said, "Then, let's start training tonight. Wait for me at the entrance of the prison at 10 p.m. Uncle, does that mean you agree?" Connie was stunned. "What should I call you if you want to be my disciple?" Rex asked with a straight face. "Master." Connie called out happily. "You can go back first. I want to eat too." Rex turned around with a smile on his face, but his voice was still calm. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 12-15. We look forward to your next visit. After sending off the last customer, Meg took off his apron, and prepared to go out with Mia and the others to look for the missing delivery man. Ding! A bell rang, and a fully armed Connie walked in with an insulated box. She took off her helmet, and excitedly said, boss, I've completed my mission. I've successfully delivered the food to the customer. The restaurant was silent. The people who were about to go out to look for her were all looking at her with complicated expressions. Did you just deliver it? Meg asked with a smile. Yes, it's still warm. Connie nodded. She couldn't hide the joy on her face. This was the first time she had done something on her own. That's really hard on the insulated box. Meg pursed his lips. The order was placed at 8 a.m., and the order was scheduled for delivery at 5 a.m. It was only delivered to the customer at 9 a.m. Dinner turned into supper. What a surprise. Most importantly, the delivery address wasn't far. It was just next door. Big Sister Connie, did you break out of the prison? Amy asked curiously. Everyone was also looking at Connie curiously. What did Connie do in the 4 hours that she disappeared? Even if she had to crawl, she could have crawled back and forth a few times. Their house was too big, and I couldn't find the door, so I climbed in. Then, I got lost again. Luckily, there were many kind people in there. They found me, and even showed me the way, and brought me out, Connie said innocently. You really broke out of the prison. Meg couldn't stay calm after hearing Connie's description. She climbed over the high walls of the Bowtie prison, and successfully got lost in the prison. What the fuck? Was that how a delivery man delivered food? Yabamiya and the others were also shocked. The Bowtie prison was very famous on the Norland continent. Connie actually climbed over the wall to get in. They didn't arrest you? Meg asked incredulously. Breaking into the Bowtie prison was no joke. Stupidity was not enough to make up for the crime. No. Connie shook her head, and excitedly said, but I've acknowledged that uncle as my master. The hairless monk, the superhero in my heart since I was young. That works too. Meg raised his eyebrows. It was one thing to deliver food to the prison, but what was with this sudden apprenticeship? Although the lawless walker had now become the deputy warden of the Bowtie prison, he had still taken in an idiotic delivery man whom he had met for the first time as his disciple. Was his brain damaged? Furthermore, most importantly, there were actually people in this world who regarded the hairless monk as the superhero in their hearts. Why is your superhero the hairless monk? Shouldn't he be a handsome, brave, romantic, and powerful knight like Alex? Meg asked in confusion. Although Alex is quite powerful, I prefer the hairless monk. Connie shook his head. Big Sister Connie, aren't you afraid of becoming bald if you acknowledge him as your master? Amy asked carefully. If becoming bald can make me stronger, then I'm willing to exchange my hair for great power. Connie nodded resolutely. Meg took a few more glances at Connie in surprise. He didn't expect her to care so much about power. Although he couldn't understand why Rex would accept Connie as his disciple, this at least explained why she could come back unscathed after successfully breaking into the Bowtie prison. With the hairless monk's protection, Connie wouldn't have to worry about being captured in Chaos City anymore. Ding! Congratulations, host. You have completed the first delivery mission. You have received a set of Mandarin duck hot pot recipe as a reward. Right at this moment, the system's voice appeared in Meg's mind. At the same time, a shiny brocade pouch appeared. The delivery mission was completed successfully. On the first day of going online, Meg was prepared to shut down this useless business. He looked at Connie and said, since you acknowledged him as your master, do you want to work in the prison? Since Rex had accepted Connie as his disciple, it would naturally be more convenient for him to have her by his side to teach her. If Connie wanted to leave, he wouldn't keep her any longer. He could see the thirst for power in Connie's eyes. She didn't mention her background to him, so it must not be easy. Boss, don't you want me anymore? Connie looked at Meg nervously. She felt warmth and security at Amy's. Although the mission today was very difficult, she felt a great sense of accomplishment. She didn't want to lose this job. Meg looked at Connie's panicked gaze and thought of how she was like a frightened kitten when he first met her yesterday. His heart ached for her. He smiled and said, "If your master wants more time to teach you, I won't hold you back. But if you are willing to stay and continue working, I can let you complete the probation period first. I will then decide whether you stay or leave." He didn't say that I should quit my job. Connie shook her head. "All right then, you can continue to work tomorrow." Meg nodded, then looked at everyone and said, "Everyone has worked hard today. Pack up and go back early to rest." Elizabeth waved her hand. Ice crystals flowed to every corner of the restaurant like water, solidifying all the dust and oil. Then, they shattered and floated out of the door, disappearing without a trace. "You guys go back first. I still have to go to my master's place. I will be back later." After leaving the restaurant, Connie waved to everyone. She got on her delivery car and quickly disappeared into the streets. This was her personal car. After washing up, Amy put on her teddy bear pajamas and let Meg dry her hair as she said softly, "Father, I think this bed is a little small. Can you give us a bigger bed?" "Amy, did I squeeze you?" Anna, who was standing at the door, grabbed the hem of her dress uneasily. "Then I will sleep on my side tonight." Amy shook her head and pointed at Ugly Duckling, who was squatting at the bathroom door, as she said, "No, Ugly Duckling squeezed us. It is too fat." "Meow," Ugly Duckling meowed aggrievedly. It lowered its head and licked its belly. Meg looked at Anna with a smile, and said, "Well, it is time to change the bed. Also, Amy and Anna have grown up. If you sleep together, then you can sleep in separate rooms. I have prepared a big bed for you in the room next door. From tonight onwards, you two can sleep in the room next door together, okay?" "Okay, I will sleep on the big bed with Anna." Amy nodded happily. "Okay." Anna also nodded with a smile. She slowly let go of the hem of her dress. In a dark and long alley, Rex looked at Connie, and said in a deep voice, "Today, we will be learning about stealth. You were able to sneak into the Bowtie prison stealthily. This means that your stealth talent is extremely outstanding. You should have received the blessing of the hunting cat totem. As long as you can fully master this talent, you will quickly become an outstanding assassin. Stealth, I am the best at it." At the same time, a bat that was hanging upside down on a tree outside the restaurant quietly flew into the small hole at the back of the restaurant. Chapter 12:16. Mag bought a 1.5-meter-long children's bed from the system, and set it up in the room next door. For the two little ones and the fat cat, it was already a big bed that was big enough for them to roll around freely. The purplish-blue decoration style was compatible with Amy and Anna's preferences. In the hands of the system, a design genius, it presented a very beautiful fairy tale style. When the children grew up, they still had to sleep in a room alone. Now that Anna was with her, Meg was not worried. Adults still had to have their own nightlife. Even if they did not have it now, Meg had to think about the future when he brought Irina back. When the two little ones who were jumping around on the bed were done with their excitement, Meg told them a short story, and the two little ones quickly fell asleep. Meg kissed Amy's forehead gently and scratched Anna's delicate nose. He turned off the bedside lamp and quietly left the room. Then he went upstairs to practice his swordsmanship. After breaking through to 8th tier, he had not fought yet. However, his swordsmanship had become more and more proficient under his daily practice. Basically, he could display his strongest strength in this realm. Alex, who was at the peak of 8th tier back then, was already able to kill the 9th tier orc commander at the border. Now, he was confident that he could do the same. An hour later, Meg, who was soaked in sweat, went downstairs to take a shower. The hot water splashed on his body, and he looked at himself in the mirror. When he first came to this world, there was almost no extra flesh on his body. He was like a skeleton that could fall apart at any time. But now, his body had become well-proportioned and fit. His chest muscles were slightly bulging, and his six-pack abs were still well-defined even when relaxed. What was even more outrageous was his skin. It was delicate and white, completely different from the sallow and emaciated appearance he had in the past. Looks like I still have to get more sun. Otherwise, not many girls' skin can compare to mine. It covers up my masculinity. Meg sighed. It was not that he deliberately maintained his skin. Every time he was struck by the heavenly tribulation when he recovered his strength, it was like he had done a comprehensive detoxification. All the impurities in his body were cleaned out. In the future, if anyone asked him how to maintain his skin, he would definitely advise them to get struck by lightning. After taking a shower, Meg casually put on a bathrobe and went back to his room. The small bed in the room had already been recycled by the system. Because the recycling price was too low, Meg chose to keep it for the time being. Who knows, it might come in handy when they have a second child in the future. Now, Meg was the only one left in the spacious bedroom. Looking at the empty bedside table beside Yi Yan's bed, Meg was still not used to it. Lifting the blanket, Meg clicked on the glittering hotpot recipe in his mind. Thinking that the foodies in this world would also be dominated by hotpot, Meg couldn't help but smile. A huge amount of information quickly flowed into Meg's mind. After a brief moment of confusion, Meg began to seriously digest this large amount of information. The ingredients for hotpot were similar all over the country. The unique soup base was what really distinguished the hotpot. Speaking of spicy hotpot, the first one to bear the brunt was naturally Chongqing hotpot. A hot and fragrant pot of thick soup, regardless of whether it was duck intestines or lotus roots and potatoes, was wrapped in a layer of shiny red oil and various seasonings when scooped up. With one bite, the heat and spiciness would erupt instantly, seeking that special pleasure between the numbness and spiciness. Meg had been to that special mountain city several times, but that level of spiciness was a little too strong for him. He had to wait for a few months after eating it once. He was more suited to the milder spiciness of Chengdu Plain. As for the clear soup hotpot, it seemed very simple, but if one wanted to make a name for himself in the clear soup hotpot world, that pot of clear soup still had to be filled with sincerity in order to jump out of the bland soup taste. Even if the guests didn't need dipping sauces, they could still taste the delicious taste. The recipe given by the system was very comprehensive. The red soup had 3 levels of insanely spicy, and medium spicy. It was similar to the spicy grilled fish and could satisfy the different choices of the guests. The level of mild spiciness didn't exist for the red soup hotpot at all. The clear soup hotpot could be ordered alone, or it could be paired with the Mandarin duck hotpot. Of course, for the people of Sichuan, the Mandarin duck hotpot was at the bottom of the chain of contempt. In addition to the soup hotpot, the cooking encyclopedia of common ingredients for hotpot was also included, such as how to cook the duck intestines and tripe, and the best time to eat the beef after putting it in the pot. These were all very precise. However, these were not things that Meg needed to learn tonight. One of the joys of eating hotpot was the process of personally putting down the ingredients and then scooping them up. The proficiency of the technique might determine the taste, but the joy of eating hotpot with friends was far more than that. It was just that hotpot was a completely new thing to the people of this world. When the time came, it was inevitable to make a hotpot eating guide for the guests. Meg digested the cooking methods of the 2 soup hotpots with full concentration for a while before he mastered them. He let out a light breath and prepared to enter the test field for the god of cookery. At this moment, the bedroom door opened silently. Meg opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the door. A black shadow flashed through the crack in the door, and the door quietly closed again. Camilla. Meg had already sensed her aura. This fellow really did not give up. He had just signed the contract this morning, and she came again at night. After thinking for a while, Meg closed his eyes again. With his current strength, he did not need to fear Camilla at all. Since she was not convinced, then he might as well see what she wanted to do today. Now that there was no one in the restaurant who could take over the work of the waitress, Meg still had to keep her here. This time I won't make the same mistake again. Camilla looked at the door with some pride. Last time, her reputation was ruined by that door. She did not even enter the door and was broken on the spot. It was really a disgrace to her reputation as the Countess. He's asleep. Camilla looked at the big bed. Her green eyes glowed red in the darkness, and she could clearly see everything in the room. Meg was lying on the bed. His breathing was steady, and it was obvious that he had fallen asleep. Where did Amy and Anna's small bed go? Camilla looked at the position where the small bed was placed with some confusion. The last time she came, Amy and Anna slept on that small bed. It's good that they slept in separate rooms. The next scene is indeed not suitable for children. In order to make this bad fellow completely submit to me, I have to teach him a lesson today. A smile appeared on Camilla's face. She raised her hand, and 3 photo stones flew out and landed in 3 different directions. Such a scene had to be recorded from all angles. After setting up the photo stones, Camilla took out the spirit-binding rope and walked to the bed. Chapter 12:17. Last time, due to her lack of experience, Meg took advantage of the loophole and teased her instead. This time, she would not repeat the same mistake. She had practiced tying ropes to the point of perfection. How to tie a beautiful and embarrassing knot was indeed a skill, but for Countess Bartoli, it was not a difficult task. Camilla could already imagine Mag begging for mercy in her hands. Such a shameful and embarrassing scene should be able to make him hand over the photo stone obediently, and then become a slave under her skirt. At that time, she would no longer have to worry about Miss Gloria having any thoughts about him. At that thought, Camilla couldn't help but smile. She wrapped the spirit-binding rope around Mag's hand that was lying on the bed. However, just as the rope went through Meg's hand suddenly clasped her wrist. Camilla was stunned for a moment. She looked at the hand that was holding her wrist. The fair and slender fingers were very strong. Isn't he asleep? Camilla panicked and looked at Meg's face. His eyes were still closed and he didn't seem to have woken up. Could it be a dream? Camilla couldn't help but suspect. However, the hand that was holding her was so strong that she couldn't continue to thread the rope through Meg's hand. This gave her a headache. Meg was too cunning. If she could tie him up while he was sleeping, then she wouldn't have to worry about him playing any other tricks. This kind of opportunity didn't come by often. Camilla tried to turn her wrist, but Meg's hand was like an iron clamp that tightly clamped her wrist. She couldn't turn it at all. Although she had the strength of a 9th-tier warrior, she wasn't very strong. She mostly used magic to control her enemies. Now that her arm was being held by Meg, it wouldn't be easy for her to break free. Bastard, you're still so strong when you're asleep. Once the dim light condensed on Camilla's other hand, it seemed that she had to use magic to release this fellow's hand from her wrist. However, before she could cast her spell, Mag suddenly pulled her hand forcefully. She, who was standing at the side of the bed, lost her balance, and fell onto the bed. She rolled over and lay next to Mag. Then, Meg naturally grabbed her other hand and easily held her in his arms. Camilla glared at him. If not for Meg's steady breathing, she would have thought that he was deliberately taking advantage of her. But now, her hands were under his control, and she was in his arms. Through the thin skirt, she could even feel the hot body behind her. His hard muscles were as clear as square blocks. Strange, this man who looked so thin and weak, how could his body be so hard? Her body immediately stiffened. She had lived for more than 300 years, experienced the last war between the races, drank the blood of her enemies, had a husband, owned a huge castle, and was the princess of the vampire clan. But she was still a virgin. In her eyes, men were dirty things. Even speaking a few words made her feel disgusted, not to mention having any physical contact with them. But now that Meg had grabbed her hands and held her in his arms, her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Her blood flowed quickly, making her feel breathless. Her pale face also flushed red. When she got married, some of the words her mother said to her surged into her mind and her body started to heat up. She wanted to break free from Meg's arms immediately, but she was worried that she would wake him up. She was in a dilemma for a moment. Isn't she only interested in women? Meg was also slightly taken aback when he felt the petite body in his arms that was getting hotter and hotter. He wanted to tease Camilla a little, so he interrupted her spellcasting. Furthermore, he only felt that there was no possibility of any romantic feelings between them, so he didn't care too much about his methods and actions. But now, even he could hear Camilla's heartbeat clearly. Vampires usually suffered from anemia for a long time, so he was a little worried that she would faint on the spot due to insufficient blood supply. Just as Camilla's face was getting hotter and hotter, and she was in a dilemma about what to do, she suddenly froze and softly muttered, No, why would I be worried about an ordinary man waking up? I am Countess Bartoli, a powerful level 9 vampire. Yes, this is really strange. Meg nodded in response. You also think it's strange? Ah! Camilla screamed, and suddenly turned around, just in time to meet Meg's eyes. In the darkness, the two pairs of eyes were almost stuck together. You're not asleep at all. Camilla exclaimed, as if she had been greatly deceived. The one who should be screaming is me, right? Halfway through my sleep, there's another woman on the bed, and she's even lying in my arms. If this were to spread, my clean reputation would be ruined. Meg said with an innocent face, you should take responsibility. Camilla retorted, I'm a woman, even if I'm at a disadvantage, it should be me who's at a disadvantage, right? I didn't ask you to take responsibility, and you actually shamelessly want me to take responsibility. You're a widow. Meg shrugged his shoulders. Then you're a widower. And you even have a child. Camilla was furious. Now that you mention it, we're quite compatible. Meg raised his eyebrows. That's true. Camilla stared blankly for a moment. After thinking carefully, it seemed to be true, and she subconsciously nodded her head. No. I definitely can't be together with this guy. Moreover, my purpose for coming here tonight is to get the images that can be used to retrieve the photo stone. Camilla quickly came back to her senses, and looked at Meg who was still grabbing her wrist, and coldly snorted, let go of me. That pervert who doesn't wear clothes when he sleeps. I'm clearly wearing a nightgown, all right. Moreover, coming to someone else's bed in the middle of the night, if we're talking about perverts, shouldn't it be you? Meg retorted. Although the nightgown was open, it was undeniable that he was still wearing it. Today I'll let you know what a real pervert is. Camilla sneered, and the surroundings around her instantly turned cold, and a dim light lit up on her fingertips again. Gotcha! At this moment, a crisp sound of metal being locked rang out, and Camilla's magic was interrupted again. Her hands were pulled together and handcuffed. You! Camilla opened her mouth in a slight panic. Smack! A round ball with a hole was stuffed into her mouth, and the rope was looped behind her to make a beautiful bow. Whoa whoa. Camilla struggled to get up. Gotcha. Meg casually put a collar around her neck, and the magic was instantly blocked. Camilla stared blankly at Meg, and her gaze gradually became filled with fear. Chapter 12:18. Her hands were locked together, her mouth was stuffed full of balls, and there was a collar with a chain around her neck. Camilla was stunned and tried to struggle. This collar had the same effect as the spirit-binding rope. Once it was fastened, Camilla found that the magic in her body was confined, making her unable to move no matter how hard she tried. As for the metal shackles on her hands, although the edges were wrapped in soft fur, it was not something that she could break free from without magic. The hollow ball in her mouth made her cheeks puff up, almost filling her mouth. She could not speak and could only make whimpering sounds. As for the strange collar and the metal chain connected to it, the first thing she thought of was those dogs that were imprisoned by humans, or those pitiful women that were imprisoned by perverts in legends. In the blink of an eye, Camilla was shocked to find that she was captured by Meg again. Although there was no shameful rope, this set of equipment made her feel even more ashamed and panicked. This guy was indeed a pervert. If it was a normal man, how could there be such a perverted set of equipment on the bed all the time, and every movement was so skillful, as if he had done it countless times? Whoa whoa. Camilla tried to make herself look calm, but she was panicking inside. This pervert, what does he want to do to me? Could it be that he wants to imprison me here and make me his sex slave? Putting a collar and chain on me, could it be that he wants to make me his dog? Countless thoughts flashed through her mind. She never thought that she would fail twice in a row in the hands of a stinky man. I'm not rusty at all. Meg was also surprised at his own skillfulness, but as a dog lover, he did often put a collar on his dog and took it out for a walk. This could explain why he was so skillful. Yes, that was it. Of course, as a gentle and polite gentleman, Meg's purpose of letting the system customize such a strange set of equipment was purely to guard against perverts. As expected, it came in handy tonight. He caught a female pervert, bad, on the spot. As for stuffing a ball into her mouth, the purpose was to prevent her from making any strange noises during the interrogation, which would disturb the rest. However, with the system's custom-made soundproof standard, even if he didn't stuff the ball, he didn't have to worry about anyone hearing strange noises. The necklace was made from a small section of Camilla's spirit-binding rope that Meg had taken from her last time. Using her rope to tie her neck, this was justice. I know you're panicking. It's okay, I won't do anything to you. Meg turned on the bedside lamp and looked at Camilla with a smile, just like a gentle and kind boss. Looking at Meg's smile, Camilla secretly heaved a sigh of relief. That's right, this guy is just a restaurant owner. He wouldn't dare to do anything to me. I'm Countess Bartoli, the princess of the vampires. However, you seem to have violated the contract between us. We agreed that you would work in the restaurant for a year, and I would hand over the photo stone to you. Then, we would be even. Meg picked up a leather whip from the ground and twirled it in his hand. But it hasn't even been a day. What are you doing in my room? Whoa whoa. Camilla wanted to explain. You don't have to explain. These things have already made your intentions clear. Meg flicked the whip in his hand and made a crisp sound beside Camilla's ear. Camilla suddenly quieted down. She didn't dare to move or make a sound. She looked at Meg. This guy almost whipped her delicate face. Don't be afraid, I'm a good person. Meg threw the whip in his hand behind him and smiled again. Seeing Meg throw away the whip, Camilla heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this guy really didn't have the guts to do anything to her. Meg flipped his wrist, and a white goose feather appeared in his hand. He slowly approached Camilla, and his smile gradually became perverted. Camilla stared blankly at the feather in Meg's hand. Why did this guy take out a feather? Could it be that he wanted to use this feather to make her submit? Ha, what a joke. How could the dignified Countess Bartoli submit to him because of a feather? Now, you have two choices. 1. Nod your head and swear in the name of your ancestors that from today onwards, you will submit to me for a year. You will not disobey or attempt to resist. 2. Shake your head and accept my punishment until you nod your head. Meg looked at Camilla and asked seriously. You want me to submit to you? Dream on. Camilla stared at Meg and shook her head firmly. No matter what methods this guy used to torture her, she would never submit to him. Since you don't have the spirit of the contract, I have no choice but to use some special methods. Meg sighed and bent down to pinch Camilla's ankle. Ugh! Camilla was shocked and wanted to retract her leg. Could it be that this pervert wanted to do that kind of thing to her? However, Meg's hand was so strong that no matter how she struggled, she could not retract her leg. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her leg. The high heels she was wearing had been taken off. Meg casually threw the high heels to the side and glanced at the fair and tender foot and the round and cute thumb that was like a pearl. Because of her nervousness, she arched a beautiful arc. He calmly looked at Camilla and said, "Nod or shake your head." Camilla shook her head firmly, but her eyes were full of panic as she looked at Meg. She had heard of a pervert called foot fetishism. Could this guy be that kind of pervert? What kind of disgusting thing was he going to do to her cute little feet? Why bother? Meg sighed. He used the white feather in his hand as if it was a paintbrush, and gently drew on the bottom of her jade-white feet. Ugh! Camilla's body trembled as if she had been electrocuted. Her mind instantly went blank. Immediately after, it was as if countless ants had crawled on the spot where the feather had just swept. That kind of numbing feeling made her body tense up. Her mouth that was blocked could only let out a meaningless moan. The decision is yours. Whenever you have thought it through, you just have to nod your head. Meg said calmly. The feather drew circles on the bottom of her foot and occasionally brushed through the gaps between her fingers, as if he was using a brush to draw a painting. Sob, 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 Camilla felt her mind go blank. She thought about how her feet were being played with by a man, and the ticklish feeling seemed to be magnified infinitely. However, her mouth was gagged, and her hands were tied behind her back. Under the ambiguous warm light, there was nothing she could do to help her. Although her rationality told her that she definitely could not give in to this guy, after experiencing the attack of the feather for more than 10 minutes, Camilla, who was soaked in sweat, finally could not bear it and nodded her head. Chapter 12:19. Camilla, who was drenched in sweat, lay limp on the bed. Her eyes were still glistening with tears, and her face was red. She looked at Meg with resentment, feeling as if all the energy in her body had been squeezed out. She did not expect this guy to use such a perverted and despicable method, tickling. Very good. Meg reached out to untie the rope behind Camilla's head, and pulled the ball out of her mouth with his pinky finger. You can swear now. I, Camilla Bathory, swear in the name of the ancestors of the vampires that from today onwards, I will submit to Meg for a year. I will not disobey or resist. Camilla gritted her teeth and said. Her mouth moved, and she felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. Remember your oath. From today onwards, work hard and don't harass me anymore. I already have a daughter. Meg nodded in satisfaction. He helped Camilla turn over, unlocked the handcuffs that bound her hands, and took off the collar on her neck. You can leave now. Meg took 2 steps back and said to Camilla, who was lying on the bed. As a normal man, he should do something in the face of such a mature lady who could not move or resist. But he was such an unusually handsome man. Taking advantage of someone's precarious situation was not what a gentleman would do. Although he was the one who caused this danger. In the distant border of the wind forest, there was a woman who was risking her life for the future and freedom of the elves. How could he plant weeds on her head? That was a valiant existence that could send a 10th-tier powerhouse flying with a stool. Putting all these aside, Meg had already passed the stage of being controlled by his lower body. So, he looked at Camilla, who was still lying motionless on the bed, and could not help but urge, "Why are you still here?" "I can't move." Camilla's resentful voice sounded. Although her magic had recovered after the collar was removed, she did not have any strength in her body. Even if she wanted to immediately leave this place that had humiliated her, her body would not allow her to do so. "Where is your home?" Meg frowned. "The boundless sea realm." Meg thought about it and felt that there was nothing wrong with what he said. "Then I can't send you home. You can sleep here tonight and go to work tomorrow," Meg said casually. I will definitely not sleep in the same bed as you." Camilla's eyes widened. Could it be that this fellow is going back on his words? "I don't want to sleep with a sweaty person." Meg rolled his eyes. Camilla heaved a sigh of relief. Although the sweat on her body made her a little uncomfortable, the bed she was lying on was very comfortable. She felt as if her whole body was going to sink into it. It was soft and super warm. If she could sleep here for the night, it would be, "You sleep on the floor." Meg spread the quilt on the ground and made a mattress beside the bed. Then, he carried the startled Camilla and put her on the ground. He pulled the quilt over her and nodded in satisfaction. "Not bad. You won't be able to find a girlfriend like this." Camilla grumbled. This fellow actually made her sleep on the floor while he slept on the bed. Hee. "I have a daughter." Meg scoffed. "Furthermore, the number of ladies who want to be my girlfriend every day is enough to circle Chaos City." Camilla choked. Meg was really not bragging. What a troublesome night attack. Meg looked at the wet bedsheets and sighed. He could only change the bedsheets and blankets, and keep the 3 photo stones at the same time. He looked at Camilla, who was wrapped up like a dumpling, and smiled. "Good night." Then, he switched off the lights. Very soon, Meg's steady breathing could be heard. Camilla, who was originally nervous, heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Meg's steady breathing. It seemed like Meg really did not have any other intentions towards her. However, she soon thought angrily, "Why? This fellow actually has no feelings for me at all. Am I really not a charming woman?" Although her mind was filled with messy thoughts, and she was sleeping in a man's room with his blanket over her, Camilla fell asleep very quickly as fatigue flooded her. Meg closed his eyes, and pushed open the test field for the god of cookery. If Camilla did not want her ancestor's coffin to be unstable, she should not try to hurt him. Because of Camilla's sudden night attack, Meg had already wasted a lot of time. In order to prevent himself from not being able to leave the test field for the god of cookery when he woke up the next day, he had to enter as soon as possible. Once he entered the kitchen, a strong spicy smell greeted him. On the seasoning rack, there were already a few open seasonings. They had already started to make their presence known even before they were cooked. Simmering hot pot base ingredients was not an easy task, especially for a pot of spicy and mellow soup. There were more than 10 kinds of spices and seasonings, and it also required precise ingredients and skillful simmering skills to make a pot of red soup that people could not stop eating after eating it. In the soup pot, the most important thing was that pot of soup. This soup was not clear water. It had to be beef soup that had been boiled for more than 10 hours. The soup was fragrant and mellow. Large pieces of butter slowly melted in the pot, and chopped bean paste was poured into the pot to make a pot of red chili oil. Sprinkling in a handful of pepper, the spicy smell naturally bloomed. Pouring in the cooked beef soup, and adding in red chili, old ginger, and other spices and seasonings, it slowly made a pot of fragrant red soup. As for the clear soup pot, it was much simpler. Clear soup was nourishing, but it was not as bland as water. It also required a pot of bone broth to release the taste of the ingredients. After replaying the steps in his mind several times, Meg began to boil the soup pot. The soup is too bland, failure. Stir-frying pepper for 2 seconds, failure. The spiciness is too low, failure. Failure. Meg was like a cold killer, calmly accepting the system's judgment of failure, and then pouring the failed red soup pot after pot into the wastewater pool. As expected, he did not feel any heartache when he did not spend money. Early the next morning, when the alarm clock rang, Meg opened his eyes almost at the same time. Camilla also opened her eyes at the same time. She had a very strange dream. She dreamed that she was caught by Meg, imprisoned with a strange instrument, and then tickled with a feather. Then she saw a hand reach over her head, grab a strange-looking thing that was making a lot of noise, and press it hard. The ringing stopped instantly, and then her eyes met with Meg's face that was poking out of the bed. "Ah!" Camilla let out a cry of surprise. That was not a dream. "Good morning, Father." At this moment, the door was pushed open, and Amy jumped in happily. Chapter 12:20. Sorry for disturbing you. Amy looked at Meg and Camilla, who were lying on the bed and on the floor. She looked at Meg with a complicated expression and slowly retracted her foot that had just stepped into the room. She even carefully closed the door. "Amy." Outside the door, Anna looked at Amy, who had closed the door, perplexed. She wanted to say hello to Uncle Mag. "Anna, if a man and a woman sleep in the same room, will something bad happen between them?" Amy looked at Anna with some distress and asked. "I don't know." Anna shook her head. After thinking seriously, she said, "But I heard from an auntie before that if a man and a woman sleep together, they will have a baby. That's how we were born." "Have a baby?" Amy's eyes lit up, but a troubled expression soon appeared on her face as she asked, "Should I tell big sister Irina about this? If I have a cute little sister, it will be fun, right?" Anna looked at Amy with some confusion, but she did not ask any more questions. In the room, Meg, who was still holding the alarm clock, and Camilla, who had sat up, were also petrified. They looked at each other with a complicated expression. "Remember the vow you made last night? Now, you can go to the bathroom to take a shower, then change into clean work clothes and start today's work," Meg said to Camilla, who was gathering magic on her fingertips. Camilla choked. Her body was still a little sore when she thought of what happened last night. However, she had already made the vow, so she could only withdraw her hand resentfully. She pulled the blanket over her head and screamed loudly. She threw the blanket away, jumped up, and walked out the door. Meg sat on the bed for a while to regain his composure. After cooking the hot pot soup continuously for dozens of days, his mind was still filled with the bright red soup. He felt a little like he was possessed. And the problem now was, what would Amy write in her little notebook after seeing the scene just now? If Irina saw it, would he still be able to keep his legs? Early in the morning, Meg was faced with a very severe test. The little fellow doesn't know anything. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Meg tried to convince himself that nothing had happened last night. He had let Camilla sleep on the floor for the entire night, and he had really kept his virginity. He got out of bed and changed into his chef's uniform. Then, he tidied up the strange things he left behind last night and threw the bed sheets into the washing machine. Just as Meg stepped out of the door, Camilla, who had changed into her chef's uniform, came out of the bathroom. Her hair was still wet and messy. She glared at Meg resentfully and went downstairs. Meg raised his eyebrows but did not take it to heart. After all, Camilla had already sworn an oath. After a simple wash, he went downstairs to prepare breakfast for the cleaners. In the kitchen, Camilla had already started cutting vegetables. Meg came downstairs and saw Amy and Anna playing with Ugly Duckling. He smiled and asked, "Amy, Anna, good morning. Why are you up so early today?" "Good morning, Uncle Meg." Anna greeted him politely. "Good morning, Father." Amy also raised her head in response. She looked in the direction of the kitchen and whispered, "Is big sister Camilla going to stay in your room from now on?" Meg pondered, thinking about how he should explain it to Amy. "Then will she give birth to a baby?" Amy asked softly. Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Amy in disbelief. "Who taught her that?" The sound of chopping suddenly stopped in the kitchen, and the dining room also fell silent. Anna looked at Meg, and then looked in the direction of the kitchen. She seemed to know something. "Amy, actually, last night, big sister Camilla fell sick, and came to the dining room to ask me for help. Because it was really late, I let her sleep on the floor, and I slept on the bed. In this way, she won't have a baby." Meg tried to explain. "She won't have a baby." Amy was a little disappointed when she heard that. She still wanted to have a little sister to play with. "Yes, she won't have a baby." Meg heaved a sigh of relief. "Then you too can have one." "That won't do." Meg hurriedly shook his head. When he saw Amy's puzzled look, he explained, "I can only have a baby with my spouse, not with other women. Camilla is not Father's spouse, so she can't have a baby with me." Amy thought for a moment and said, "Then, what about Mother? When are you going to bring her back and give me a baby?" Camilla, who was holding a knife in the kitchen and about to kill someone, suddenly stopped and listened carefully. Speaking of which, Meg had never mentioned anything about Amy's mother, so she did not know who she was or where she was. For some reason, she felt a little nervous. "Soon. Father will bring her back soon," Meg said with a smile. "That's great." Amy smiled. "Then you too must give birth to a baby for me to play with." Okay. Meg nodded with a smile. However, he could not make the decision. He can actually bring her back. Looks like it's impossible between him and Miss Gloria. Camilla's face lit up, but she felt a little empty in her heart. She thought angrily, "Scumbag, he already has a wife and a child, but he still keeps so many young and beautiful girls by his side, using food and work to deceive their feelings." Anna hugged the Ugly Duckling with envy in her eyes. She already did not have the chance to see her mother again. After comforting Amy, Meg went into the kitchen. However, he did not find the ingredients used for hot pot in the kitchen stove and fridge. "System, where are my ingredients?" Meg asked in his heart after he walked around the kitchen to make sure he did not miss anything. Ding! The current restaurant is not suitable to launch hot pot. Host, please set up a designated hot pot area. After the mission is completed, all hot pot ingredients will be unlocked. If the mission fails, the right to operate the hot pot business will be revoked. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. Why didn't Madam come out for the whole night? Could it be that she fell into the trap again during this night attack? On the treetop outside the restaurant, Caesar yawned and shook off the snow that had fallen from the tree. He was a little worried. He had been waiting outside the restaurant for the whole night to make sure that no one entered or left the restaurant. Without any disturbance, it should be easy for Madam to deal with Meg with her strength. However, he did not expect to see Madam come out of the restaurant after waiting for the whole night. What should he do? Chapter 12:21. Designated Hotpot Area. Meg muttered. The system's request was not without reason. Eating hotpot had always been a leisurely thing. Sitting there, ordering a table full of dishes, eating and chatting with the steaming hot soup pot, it was not unusual for them to eat for the whole night. That was not a friendly thing for other customers. Moreover, the existing wooden tables were not suitable for eating hotpot. He had to buy a batch of special hotpot tables. System: the 4 shops next door are mine. Design and renovate 2 of them into designated hotpot areas. Meg said in his heart. Fortunately, Mobai had left the shops open for him. Otherwise, he would have to set his sights on the Bawtai prison. You have obtained 200 square meters of shop space. At the same time, you can expand the business area outside by 100 square meters. After calculation, the cost of the designated hotpot area is as follows. Interior renovation costs 300,000 copper coins, 33 sets of self-heating hotpot tables and chairs, 330,000 copper coins. Total, 830,000 copper coins. The system's voice sounded. Fixed price, 400,000 copper coins, Meg said calmly. Host. Is there anyone who haggles like you? The system was a little uneasy. Meg curled his lips and said, for 200 square meters of shop space, 400,000 is more than enough according to the standard of renovation. Moreover, you are using first-hand materials. There are no middlemen to profit from the price difference. This price is about right. Host, you can't compare it according to Earth standards. In order to adapt to the various strange races in this world and avoid problems due to the materials not being able to bear the weight, the materials used by the system are all top-grade materials shipped directly from all over the continent. For example, the deep cold granite collected from the deep sea can withstand the pressure of 100,000 pounds without cracking. Even if a giant dragon shows its original form, it can still withstand it. The hotpot made of super alloy can ensure that the hotpot is evenly heated and will never stick to the pot. It can withstand the temperature difference of 1,000 degrees in an instant. Also, Meg was speechless as he listened to the system talk about the sources of various renovation materials. This was no longer a simple luxury. It was not even that difficult to embed diamonds. Alright, seeing that you are so sincere, I will add another 99 copper coins. I believe you will definitely become the greatest designer in history, Meg encouraged. You? Do you really think so? The system sounded touched. Yes. Meg rolled his eyes, but his voice was very firm. Nobody knows a son better than his father. This system is too touched. Since that's the case, this system agrees to your offer and accepts this renovation mission at the price of 400,999 copper coins. May I ask, do you want to start the renovation now? No, let's wait until tonight. It's easy to arouse suspicion if we make such a big deal all of a sudden. Meg's mouth curved into a smile. They had just launched the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. There was no need to rush the hot pot. After confirming the matter of the hot pot, Meg began to cook congee with pork and century egg for the cleaners. He presented the congee to them at 6:30 sharp. Although their breakfast every day was monotonous congee with pork and century egg, the cleaners still ate it with relish. To them, such a delicious breakfast with meat was unimaginable in the past. While the cleaners were eating porridge, Meg wrote a notice and pasted it on the shop next door. The designated hot pot area is being renovated. Please look forward to it. Yabamiya read aloud. She looked at Meg in confusion and asked, Boss, what's hot pot? Is it a pot that can catch fire? Amy asked curiously. The girls also looked at Meg curiously. It seemed that Meg was preparing to expand the shop again. We'll eat hot pot tonight. You'll know tonight, Meg said mysteriously. He didn't reveal too much. His words aroused everyone's curiosity and anticipation. The customers who came to line up outside the restaurant also saw the notice pasted on the shop next door. They had a lot of guesses about the designated hot pot area. However, Meg was tight-lipped and didn't reveal anything. He only said that he would reveal the secret tonight. It could be said that he had whetted everyone's appetite. Madam. You're finally out. Caesar saw Camilla coming out from the side of the restaurant and rushed forward excitedly. He looked at Camilla, who was still wearing her chef's uniform, and asked with a strange expression, Madam, are you all right? Humph, where did you go last night? Didn't you know to look for me when you didn't hear any news about me? Camilla snorted coldly. Didn't you ask me to stay outside? Caesar said weakly. Scram. A ball of black light rose from Camilla's feet, and she disappeared on the spot. Boss, what should we do now? It's so embarrassing to go to class like this. A group of pink pigheads gathered in the alley outside the school gate. They were the members of the Little Tyrant gang who had their magic reflected by Amy yesterday. At this moment, everyone was looking at Bolton with worried expressions. Although they had all turned into pigheads, their figures didn't change, and their facial features could still be seen. Sigh, at the end of the day, we're still inferior. In front of big sister Amy, we're all little brothers. Bolton sighed. He was also a little distressed. He thought about how he had painstakingly planned for 3 years and went through hundreds of battles to establish such a huge foundation. However, if the Little Tyrant gang were to enter the school with pigheads today, their dignity would be destroyed, and all their previous efforts would be in vain. They had to go to class. The school could tolerate their fooling around to a certain extent, but they were very strict about attendance. If they missed class without a reason, they would most likely be expelled. However, if they went to class like this, they would definitely be treated as a joke by their classmates. Wow, so many pigheads. At this moment, a familiar voice came from the alley entrance. At the same time, a bicycle stopped. Paige. Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at the group of primary school students who were staring at the pink pigheads in the alley. It seemed like they were the ones who had fought with Amy and the others yesterday. Amy's shout successfully attracted the attention of many students who were in school. Many of them came forward to watch. Isn't this the Little Tyrant gang? Yeah, why did they all turn into pigheads? Aren't they usually the ones who turn others into pigheads? Why did they all turn into pigheads this time? The students muttered curiously. Many of the students who had been bullied by the Little Tyrant gang couldn't help but laugh. Calm down, bring out your aura. Bolton shouted at the gang members who wanted to cover their faces with their school bags. He walked toward the alley entrance with his head held high and his chest puffed out. He knelt on one knee and said solemnly, "Greetings, Big Sister Amy." The other gang members were stunned when they saw this. They immediately went forward and knelt on one knee as well. They said in unison, "Greetings, Big Sister Amy. Has the gang been successfully recruited?" The orderly slogan stunned Meg, who was about to leave. He looked at the primary school students with pig heads and tried his best not to laugh. Chapter 12:22. After the morning service ended, Meg went to the study to read the information. He had to finish reading this box of information in 7 days. After that, the Grey Temple would collect all the information. This box contained the secret history and the latest news of the various races on the Norland continent. The intelligence personnel of Chaos City had spent a lot of effort and cost to obtain it. It would be a huge fortune no matter who got it, and it could cause a lot of trouble for Chaos City. Meg naturally had no objection to that. Michael and Roland had already shown enough sincerity by handing over such core information to him. Besides, it was not difficult for him to finish reading and memorizing all the information in 7 days. The goblins' territory was located in the east of the Norland continent. With Vic Mountain as the center, they had built an underground cavern empire. The goblins' power was ranked last on the Norland continent. They only had 7 to 8 10th-tier powerhouses. However, the goblins who were good at business and mining had accumulated a huge amount of wealth. The countless underground caverns in Vic Mountain had also become the goblins' indestructible fortress. No one could defeat the goblins in the underground caverns. This saying had been circulating on the continent for thousands of years. Hence, even though the goblins looked weak, they had the ability to protect themselves on the Norland continent. The goblins, who were known for their cunning, had a unity that put other races to shame when it came to internal governance. In history, the goblins had never had any internal strife. In this set of information, there was almost no flaw in the internal structure of the goblins. The only problem was that they were indeed very weak. It was not easy for them to defend their current territory, let alone expand outwards. It was precisely because of this that the goblins chose to form an alliance with Chaos City. The Forest Trolls' territory was adjacent to the goblins. The tall trolls lived in the vast Demon Tower forest. Their huge bodies also gave them great power and unique talent. In terms of individual talent and power, they were second only to the giant dragons. Almost all the trolls could break through to the 5th tier, and they also had plenty of mid-tier and high-tier combat power. However, the forest trolls' population was not huge. Their unique reproduction method was destined to limit the growth of their population. However, the Trolls' King was very interested in expanding his territory. He was even more ambitious in forming an alliance with the orcs. They had their eyes on the vast the Wind Forest. Perhaps it could help them break through the shackles of the slow growth of their population. The territory of the evil demon clan was located in the Endless Sea. The numerous evil demon clans occupied the islands in the sea and thrived there. Their numbers had been increasing for nearly 100 years. Furthermore, over the past 100 years, they had been fighting against each other, so their combat abilities were extremely strong. The islands in the boundless sea realm were no longer enough to satisfy the ambitions of all the races. Hence, they started to search for more land on the Norland continent. The alliance between the demons and the Roth Empire was the most powerful alliance at the moment. It could even rival the giant dragons. In the past 100 years, the Roth Empire's power had grown the fastest. The humans, who had been recuperating, had multiplied at a terrifying speed. They had also organized and developed 2 stable leveling systems for knights and magic casters. With the support of a huge population, the number of top-notch powerhouses had reached the top in the past 100 years, and the number of mid-level magic casters and knights had crushed any other race. It was very hard to imagine that the humans, who were seen as 2-legged sheep by the demons and orcs back then, could establish a powerful force that was only second to the giant dragons in just a short 100 years. Meg was attracted by a piece of news when he browsed through the information about the orcs. There was a rebellion in the Falk tribe. The chief was killed by his cousin, Gary, who colluded with the August tribe and imprisoned the chief's son. He became the new chief of the Falk tribe. In this rebellion, apart from the chief's son who was imprisoned, all of the chief's relatives were executed. Only the chief's daughter was missing. She might have escaped. The Falk tribe was the second largest orc tribe. They believed in cheetahs, were very powerful, and had many powerhouses in their tribe. Meanwhile, the August tribe was the largest orc tribe. They believed in giant bears. Who would have thought that they would participate in the Falk tribe's rebellion? Of course, all these were not important. What was important was that Meg saw the description of the Falk tribe's chief's daughter at the bottom, 14 years old, Cat ears, brown curly hair, freckles on her nose, hee hee. Isn't this Connie freaking? Meg had a complicated expression. Connie had mentioned her brother before, but he didn't expect that he was her only family member left. A rebellion had turned her from a little princess of a tribe into a stray cat. She had stumbled all the way from the Twilight Forest to Chaos City. In order to avoid being hunted down, she must have suffered a lot along the way. A morning passed in the blink of an eye. Meg put down the information about the orcs in his hands, and kept the box in the secret compartment. The relationships between the various orc tribes were very complicated. Just the Fok tribe and the August tribe alone had many disputes. The August tribe, which was in favor of war, managed to control the Fok tribe, which was in favor of peace, through a rebellion. This was obviously to achieve internal unity before the peace talks. Meg went downstairs. Connie was lying on the counter, staring at Ugly Duckling in a daze. The two cats were twitching their ears as if they were having some kind of strange communication. Connie turned to look at Meg when she heard the footsteps. She smiled and asked, "Boss, when do I start work?" She couldn't wander around the streets, and couldn't show her face in the ice cream shop. Hence, she could only daydream in the restaurant even when she didn't need to work. "I haven't received any new orders today." "You will have to start work when you have new orders for, are you full?" Meg shook his head. Then, he curiously asked, "Don't you need to learn from your master during the day?" "No. My master said that I only need to learn from him every night. I don't need to learn during the day." Connie shook her head and yawned. Meg was a little surprised. However, he understood after thinking about it. Cats were nocturnal animals, and Rex was teaching according to their aptitude. Hence, he nodded with a smile and said, "Then you should sleep more during the day." "You won't deduct my salary, right?" Connie asked nervously. "Do I look like that kind of person?" Meg pursed his lips. He wasn't an evil capitalist. "Then, I'm going to sleep." Connie lay on the counter, and started to sleep immediately. Ugly Duckling walked over slowly, and reached out its chubby paw towards Connie's head. It retracted its paw just as it was about to touch her. After thinking for a while, it lay down too. It rested its head on her arm, and closed its eyes comfortably. Meg looked at the two sleeping cats, and smiled helplessly. He turned and went into the kitchen to prepare the ingredients for lunch. After a while, Camilla came too. Chapter 12:23. In the afternoon, Meg began to prepare for the hot pot. Considering that this world knew nothing about the great invention of the hot pot, he decided to have a live stream of the hot pot before it was officially launched. Yes, he would personally eat it for them to see. As the venue was already in place, Meg easily obtained a hot pot table, ingredients, and the right to use the pots and pans from the system. There was a hole in the middle of the round black granite table, and it was just big enough to fit a big pot. There were 4 types of pots to choose from: a 9-square grid, a double pot, a pot within a pot, and a single pot. The table was very big, and could accommodate 9 people at the same time. There was a reason for this. There were 9 squares, 9 seats, and each person could claim 1 square. Everyone would do their own thing and not disturb each other. Even if one person came alone, they could still have a meal with 9 people. Of course, Meg also prepared some tables for 4 or 6 people, which were suitable for different numbers of people. It was hot pot, after all. It was better to eat it with familiar people. As Camilla and Connie couldn't show up, he prepared a small pot for 2 people for them, so they could only eat the hot pot in the restaurant. There were many passengers sitting on the back of a huge white bird. Moss. "Young mistress, they said Chaos City is just ahead," Laura whispered to Vanessa, who was wearing a veil. "Really?" Seems like we can still make it for dinner. Vanessa's eyes lit up with excitement. Young mistress, why don't we go back? His master and madam must be very worried about you now. It's not good. It's all right. We'll go back after a few days. Laura shook her head. She looked at Laura, who was in a dilemma, and held her hand with a smile. Don't worry. I won't let them punish you when we go back. I forced you to do all this. They know my character very well. But, Vanessa pressed her finger gently on Laura's lips with a smile, and said, Shoo. We're going to reach Chaos City soon. Let's put aside all the unhappy things. The most important thing now is to prepare for the delicious food. Laura's mouth moved, but she didn't say anything in the end. She just sighed in her heart. She naturally knew the princess's character the best. Although she was usually very obedient, as long as she set her mind on something, she would definitely do it. The flying steeds stopped outside Chaos City. Everyone dismounted and walked towards the city gate. So Chaos City is so majestic. It's not inferior to Rodu in any way. Vanessa looked up at the towering city walls and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Then, she said happily, as expected, I should come out more often. The outside world is much bigger than I thought. Laura looked around cautiously. Although she was just a maid who didn't know any magic or martial arts, there were no guards around the princess, so she became the princess' only guard. She had to be on her guard. When they entered the city, Vanessa asked the guard standing at the city gate, How do I get to Mamie's? The guard took a glance at Vanessa and Laura. The two little girls didn't have steeds, and it seemed that they were attracted by Mamie's fame. During this period of time, he had already met a few people who asked for directions. He smiled and said, After you enter the city, just hail a horse-drawn carriage with the words Operation on it. They will take you there. It's a little far to walk from the north to the south of the city. Thank you. Vanessa thanked him politely before entering the city with Laura. After entering the city, there was no one around. Laura whispered, Princess, we shouldn't take a stranger's horse-drawn carriage. If the coachman has ill intentions, Laura, this is Chaos City, the city of peace. It's the safest city on the Norland continent. Vanessa smiled as she flagged down a horse-drawn carriage with the words Operation on it. But isn't Chaos City famous for its chaos? Laura was a little perplexed. Go back and read more books. Vanessa patted Laura's head with a smile. Then, she looked at the coachman, and asked, Sir, can you send us to Mamie's? Of course. I go there a few times every day. The coachman smiled honestly. Let's go, Vanessa said to Laura before climbing into the horse-drawn carriage. Oh. Laura rubbed her head before climbing into the horse-drawn carriage as well. The princess had read a lot of books, so she knew much more than she did. Sir, is Mamie's very famous in Chaos City? Vanessa asked the coachman as the horse-drawn carriage set off. Yes. Mamie's is the most famous restaurant in Chaos City now. It has only been open for half a year, but the entrance is already filled with people when it's mealtime. If we get there late, we won't even get to eat. Then will we be able to eat if we go now? Vanessa was a little nervous. If we go now, we'll be able to get to the front of the line. However, Mamie's only opens at 5 p.m., so we'll have to wait for an hour to get there. What kind of restaurant is this? Customers have to wait in line. Laura murmured. Did the princess have to wait in line for a meal with a bunch of people? The coachman chuckled and said, Young lady, you have no idea how many people love to eat Mamie's food. However, that restaurant has many strange rules, so you have to follow them. Otherwise, you'll be blacklisted by Mr. Mac, and you won't be allowed to enter the restaurant in the future. Waiting in line is just one of the rules. As long as I can eat good food, it's only right to wait in line for a while. Talented people have some personality. Vanessa smiled, and looked forward to it even more. The horse-drawn carriage traveled along the wide streets of Chaos City. Vanessa lifted the curtains and looked out. There were neat rows of houses on both sides of the street, and even though there weren't many people on the streets due to the cold weather, she could feel that the atmosphere here was a lot more relaxed than in Rodu. Laura was also a little surprised to see demons and trolls walking on the streets from time to time. Vanessa was very calm. This was the most special thing about Chaos City. All races could coexist peacefully here, and this was something that couldn't be seen anywhere else on the continent. The Aiden Square is up ahead. It's the largest square in Chaos City, and it's also a business hub. You'll be able to find places to eat, drink, and play here, the coachman reminded. The vast square and the bustling commercial street in the square appeared before them. The Aiden Square was more lively than any other commercial street in Rodu. The horse-drawn carriage passed through the entire square, and stopped at the westernmost side. "Young lady, we've arrived at Mamie's." The coachman stopped the carriage and smiled. "Thank you." Vanessa instructed Laura to pay the fare. Before they even got out of the carriage, a rich spicy aroma had already wafted in through the gap in the curtains. Chapter 12:24. Ahem. Vanessa choked and coughed twice. Chili was not a rare spice to the royal family. It was just that the chefs in the palace rarely used it. A slight spicy smell could increase one's appetite, but such a rich spicy smell was a little choking to the nose. "It's so spicy," Laura said with a frown. She took out a handkerchief and handed it to Vanessa before handing the money to the coachman. "Miss, you came at the right time. It seems like Mr. Mac is up to something interesting today." The coachman took the money and said with a smile. "Oh." Vanessa's eyes lit up when she heard that. She covered her mouth and nose with the handkerchief and got out of the carriage. The spiciness was getting stronger, but after getting used to it, it didn't smell bad. Instead, she could clearly feel the spiciness. It was indeed very different from normal chili. The aroma was even stronger than the spiciness. It was a taste that made people feel hot and happy. However, Vanessa's eyes were attracted by the strange table at the entrance of the restaurant. There was a hole in the middle of the black and gold marble table. A strange-looking red soup pot was filling the hole. Red chili floated on the soup and was still steaming. The spicy aroma was coming from the red soup pot. There was a small pot in the middle of the red soup pot. A thick white soup was boiling in the middle of the pot. 2 pieces of red tomatoes and white and green onions floated on the surface of the soup. Compared to the red soup pot, the clear soup pot in the middle seemed a little small. It was like a trembling baby in the arms of a burly man. There were already many customers standing at the entrance of the restaurant. They were all looking at the soup pot curiously. It seemed like they didn't know what it was either. "Is that a witch's soup pot?" Laura came out and looked at the soup pot and muttered softly. The soup pot looked a little scary and gave off a strange smell. "Let's go take a look and we'll know." Vanessa couldn't wait to jump out of the carriage and walk towards the restaurant. She had already seen the plaque with the words Mamie on it. She finally came to the Holy Land that she had been yearning for day and night. She couldn't help but feel excited. She had already decided that the first dish she was going to eat was eggplant with garlic sauce. She had almost flipped through that vegetarian book and had eaten it many times in her dreams. Vanessa, who was wearing a veil, was wearing a plain cotton dress and a white cloak. She looked like an ordinary well-to-do young lady. On the other hand, Laura was dressed in a simple cotton padded robe, and she didn't look like a royal at all. "Is this hot pot? I don't see any fire here." Although I don't see any fire, I can already feel that my throat is on fire from the smell. Isn't there a clear soup pot in the red soup pot? I feel that the soup should taste pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to eat roast duck tonight. I've saved up money for a month, and now I can finally eat it. Many customers who had come with their own money were standing nearby and discussing curiously. Mr. Mac had said that he was going to show everyone what hot pot was tonight, so many customers had come early. However, a few waiters had brought out a large table and set it up. They had also brought out a strange-looking soup pot, but there had been no further movement after that. They didn't know what Mr. Mac was up to. Could it be that the delicious food was hidden under the red chili? Vanessa stood quietly in the crowd and listened to the conversations around her. Her eyes were shining. Among these people, there were employees who had secretly left work early to watch the new product taste test. There was also a clothing store owner who had saved up money behind his wife's back and came to eat alone. There was also an independent writer who had contributed to a gourmet magazine and was looking for inspiration. Customers of different identities and races were gathered together at this moment to harmoniously and amicably discuss Mr. Mac's new product, or to debate whether tofu pudding should be eaten sweet or savory. What a strange scene. Vanessa felt as if she had found a group. She didn't know that there were so many people who loved to eat in this world. They could even cross the boundaries of race and identity, making everyone seem to be equal. Laura stood beside Vanessa and cautiously guarded against the people around her, especially the three orcs standing not far away. She had heard that orcs were very scary people who would cook and eat children and women like wild animals. If they knew about the princess's identity, it could be disadvantageous to the princess. Amy ran over from the magic potion shop next door, and familiarly greeted the customers who frequented the restaurant. Then, she knocked on the door and called out in a crisp voice, "Father, school is over." Wow! What a cute little elf. Vanessa's eyes lit up. She loved elves the most. Beautiful and elegant elves always made people feel that they were easy to get close to. When she was little, every time Princess Irina came to the palace, she would secretly go to see her. She dreamed that she could become a beautiful and elegant woman like her when she grew up. And now, there was a little girl wearing a little magician robe at the door of the restaurant. She also had silver hair and exquisite little pointy ears. She raised her little hand to knock on the door, and her soft voice was very cute. The customers also looked at Amy with doting and elation in their eyes. Every time they saw the little boss, their mood couldn't help but improve. Of course, seeing her eat was an exception. That was probably the most torturous thing in the world. Amy. Anna opened the door with a smile. Meow. Ugly Duckling rushed out of the door and jumped into Amy's arms. Amy, wash your hands and get ready for dinner. Meg came out of the kitchen with a multi-tiered dining cart filled with all kinds of ingredients, and looked at Amy. Okay. Amy nodded her little head. Then, she looked at Meg, and asked, "Father, are we having hot pot tonight?" Yes. Meg nodded, and parked the dining cart next to the table by the door. There was also a red soup hot pot on the table, but it was a few sizes smaller than the one outside. It was just right for 2 people. Camilla, Connie, you 2 can eat alone tonight. This is a hot pot guide. I have already arranged the ingredients according to the order. Later, you 2 just have to follow the instructions and put the ingredients into the pot to cook. When it's time, immediately pick them up and eat. Meg looked at Camilla and Connie, who were standing at the side. He then took out an electronic alarm clock from his pocket and placed it on the table. See this button? Press it, and it will start the timer. Don't forget the time. Do we still have to cook it ourselves? Camilla frowned slightly. Not only did he want her to cut the vegetables, but now he even wanted her to cook dinner herself. Was he trying to poison her? She had cooked a pot of porridge, and Caesar had to lie down for a month before he could stand up after taking a bite. No pop-up window. Chapter 12:25. Everyone had left, leaving only Camilla and Connie in the dining room. They sat opposite each other with a bubbling pot of soup between them. They stared at each other in an eerie silence, neither of them making the first move. "Do you know how to cook?" Camilla spoke first. Connie shook her head. "We eat raw sometimes. I usually only drink fresh blood." Camilla frowned slightly. They looked at the dazzling array of ingredients on the dining cart beside them and sighed at the same time. Then, they turned to look out of the window at the people who were already sitting in a circle and mixing dipping sauces under Meg's guidance. They looked envious. "I don't think it's that difficult. Why don't we take a look at this guide first?" Connie retracted her gaze and handed a hotpot guide to Camilla. She picked one up for herself and started reading it seriously. "Tripe, pick it up with chopsticks and put it into the boiling soup. Put it down for a second, lift it up for a second. Repeat the action 8 times. Then you can eat it. Don't exceed the time limit. Otherwise, you will lose your soul." Connie read softly. Their gazes fell on the first plate on the first level of the dining cart. There were a few thin pieces of something brown and black soaked in water. They looked wrinkled. "This isn't something from a cow's stomach, is it?" Camilla frowned. As a noble vampire countess, she only drank the freshest virgin blood. Even if she had to settle for the next best thing, it had to be clean pigeon blood. Just the sound of something from a livestock's stomach sounded dirty. Meg was actually letting them eat something like this. "Yes, it's so special. I've never eaten something like this before." Connie was full of curiosity. Even when orcs ate wild animals, they would also clean the animal's organs. She had never seen orcs eating an organ alone like this. Moreover, this cooking method of doing it up and down was very special. It sounded very simple. "Aunt, why don't I try?" Connie picked up the long chopsticks eagerly. She had just learned how to use chopsticks recently. She reluctantly picked up a piece of tripe from the bowl and put it into the boiling soup. The red soup boiled as soon as the tripe entered the pot. When she picked up the chopsticks again, there was nothing left. "Oh ho!" Connie stared blankly at the empty chopsticks. Oh no, she didn't get to eat it. The red soup pot was covered with a layer of dried chili and Sichuan pepper. The thin tripe was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Connie picked up the chopsticks and dug around in the soup for a while, but she still couldn't find the missing piece of tripe. "There's no need to look for it. That piece of tripe has already lost its soul." Camilla pointed at the alarm clock beside her. "Tripe, I'm sorry." Connie retracted her chopsticks apologetically. It seemed like she wasn't fated to have this piece of tripe. Moreover, she couldn't do something as difficult as doing it up and down with chopsticks. She could only give up on this novel food and pick up the hot pot guide again. Duck intestine. Pick it up with chopsticks. Do it up and down until the duck intestine rolls up. Connie was silent for a while. She stared at the long and thin duck intestine for a while. Then, she looked up at Camilla and said, "Will we starve to death?" Camilla thought seriously for a while. Then, she stared at Connie's neck. "Why don't you let me take a bite?" "No, no. Let's eat the hot pot." Connie shrunk her neck and continued to read the guide. Unlike the 2 people in the restaurant who were clueless, outside the restaurant, everyone was already sitting around the table. According to Meg's instructions, they had prepared the dipping sauces that suited their tastes. The customers in the line had already surrounded the hot pot table. They looked at Meg and the others curiously. Mr. Max said that he would show everyone what hot pot was today. Originally, everyone thought that he was going to show them how to cook. However, from the looks of it, it didn't seem like that. I didn't know Mr. Mac was so young. Vanessa, who was standing in the front row, looked at Meg curiously. She had been to the Imperial Kitchen a few times. The chefs who were in the line were all old. They were at least greasy middle-aged men. However, this boss Mag appeared to be only in his early 30s. He was tall and slender, and his skin was very good. It didn't look oily at all, and the mustache on his upper lip gave him a mature charm. He always had a warm smile on his face, which made him very likable. Also, there are so many beautiful girls. Laura stared at those girls. Every one of them was so beautiful. They were not inferior to the princess at all. Were they just waitresses in the restaurant? Mr. Mac, you're not going to show us, are you? Harrison asked. Yes. Hot pot is a new way to eat good food. However, everyone might be unfamiliar with it, so I'm going to show you today. After the hot pot is officially released, everyone will know how to eat it, Meg said with a smile. In the past, Little Boss was the only one who ate for us to see. Now, the entire restaurant is doing it. You win, Harrison complained. The other customers suddenly understood what was going to happen next. Their expressions became a little strange. First, we have to make a dipping sauces that suit our tastes. This can make the food cooked in the same hot pot better suit your taste. Meg showed everyone his dipping sauces, then picked up the guide beside him. This is a hot pot guide. It lists all the cooking methods and times. As long as you follow the guide and dip the cooked food in the dipping sauces, it will be delicious. In other words, we have to cook this hot pot ourselves. We have to do it ourselves. Can't we eat it ready-made? I'm a kitchen killer. I'm afraid I'll die from the food I cook. It sounds so troublesome. I'm 18. Can I do it? Hearing that, everyone started to talk. They were full of doubts about this new method of eating. The soul and joy of hot pot is participation. You can chat while you wait, slow down the pace of life, and enjoy the delicious food. This is the true essence of hot pot. Meg shook his head with a smile. Then, he pointed to his lips with his finger. Watch and eat. Please be quiet. Be good and be quiet. Amy looked back at everyone and said seriously, I'm super hungry. Everyone looked at the blue-purple flames dancing in Amy's hand and immediately shut their mouths. However, there was still a trace of doubt in their eyes when they looked at Meg. If they could make delicious food themselves, why would they come to Amy's? Meg withdrew his gaze from the customers and looked at everyone at the table. He smiled and said, there's nothing that hot pot can't cook. But when it comes to taste, tripe and duck intestines can rank in the top 3. Use your chopsticks to pick up a piece of tripe and put it into the boiling hot pot. Let the tripe be completely immersed in the boiling red soup. Wait for a second, then immediately take it out of the pot and let it cool down a little. Then, immediately put it back into the pot and repeat this action. Wait until the tripe starts to bubble. That's the best time. While the tripe isn't paying attention, roll it in the dipping sauces, gently blow twice, and then put it directly into your mouth. Meg chewed on the fragrant and spicy tripe. Every bite was crisp and chewy. The spiciness blossomed on the tip of his tongue. His mixed-colored hair opened up from the stimulation, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.